students, welcome you all on the last lecture of Ind AS 116. Students, today we are going to complete this detailed and lengthy standard. Right? So far we have covered the lessee accounting in detail, the lessor accounting in the last class. We have also covered the concept of sublease, right? So where the head lessee becomes the intermediate lessor, then what is the accounting in the books of the intermediate lessor, right? Because intermediate lessor is the person who is acting in the first contract, who is acting in the capacity of a lessee, and in the second contract he is acting in the capacity of a lessor, right? So what is the accounting which is there in the books of head lessee and intermediate lessor? Correct. So friends, because we have also understood so far that in lease accounting, in the books of the lessee, there is no classification of a lease, right? Lessee has to create a right of use asset in the books of account, and lessee has to credit the lease liability. The only exception is the lessee is not required to create a right of use asset in two cases. One, whenever there is a short-term lease. Number two, whenever there is a leases of low value items, right? In that cases, lessee has to accrue the rent expense over the period as and when incurred, and lessee has to debit rent and credit bank. Okay. So these are the two cases where lessee is not required to carry out the lease accounting under Ind AS 116. Lessee is not required to carry out Ind AS 116 accounting, right? In finance leases, since the lessee is the owner of the asset, okay. For example, lessee has purchased a house or a lessee has purchased a building, right? The life of the building is 50 years and lessee has given that building on a lease basis, okay, to the tenant for 10 years. So after 10 years, this asset will remain with the lessor for 40 years, next 40 years, right? So in case of lessee, it was very easy that whatever lessee is paying, whatever rights lessee is getting for any period of time, that right is getting capitalized at a right of use asset. But here, the lessor has purchased the asset. The lessor is the owner of the asset, right? So lessor has already capitalized the asset in the books of accounts. Okay. And if the lessor is leasing out that asset, which is a very small part of the economic life of the asset. For example, in case of a building, the life is 50 years and the lessor has leased out for 10 years. So in this case, it is not appropriate. It is not appropriate to de-recognize that asset, or it is not appropriate to do something else. And hence, from the lessor perspective, standard still keeps that you need to classify that lease into operating lease or finance lease. If it is an operating lease where risk and rewards are not substantially getting transferred, in that case, you are required to keep your asset in your books of accounts. If it is a building, if it is an investment property, if it is a PP, you need to depreciate the asset over the useful life of that asset. And when you are leasing out for any period, so whenever the rent is getting accrued, you recognize your rental income on a straight line basis, rental income. Okay. Friends, but let's say 50 years is the life of the building and you have leased out that building for, let's say, 40 years. It means majority part of the economic life of the asset you have leased out, right? So initial 40 years you have leased out. So in this case, the majority part of the economic life is used by the lessee. In this case, it will be classified as a finance lease, and in this case, you have to recognize finance lease receivable and you have to de-recognize your asset, which is either PP or investment property, right? So friends, and hence from the lessor perspective, the concept of operating lease and finance lease still exist in the books of accounts of the lessor, right? Friends, while discussing the lessee accounting, at the time of subsequent measurement, we have also discussed lease modification, right? In lessor accounting, there is also a lease modification, right? So that is not relevant and not important from the examination perspective, but we will cover this lease modification. We will cover this lease modification today as well, right? We'll cover this lease modification after completing sale and leaseback transactions. Okay. First, we will be covering sale and leaseback transaction. Then we will be covering lease modification in the books of the lessor. And then we will be covering the separation of lease and non-lease component. This is what which was left. Okay. Yes. So let me take you on the sale and leaseback. Right. So many students have joined so far. Good morning, Anila. Good morning, Anu. Good morning, Tushar, Hemant, Mamta, Niranjan, Jini, Vignesh. Good morning, everyone. And the people on the portal. Good morning, Radhika. Good morning, Rahul. So good morning, everyone. Friends, coming to the sale and leaseback transaction. What is meant by sale and leaseback transaction? Okay. What is meant by sale and leaseback transaction? For example, I am a owner of a house. Okay. Owner of a flat. Owner of a building. I am an owner of a building. Okay. So I have sold my building to Vignesh, right? At rupees 50 lakhs. I have sold my building to Vignesh. Okay. And this building in my books is a property, plant and equipment. Why? Because I am running my head office. I am running my corporate office from that building. Okay. I am running my corporate office from that building. So when I sold this building to Vignesh, I am become the seller and Vignesh become the buyer. Okay. Since I was maintaining my office, I was running my office from that building, I requested Vignesh to lease out that building to me, right? Lease out that building to me. Okay. So Vignesh become a lessor and I become a lessee. So I am a seller who is a lessee in this transaction. So I am a seller lessee and Vignesh is a buyer lessor, right? Sir, this is very simple. So let's say if you are a seller lessee, first you have to do the sale transaction, means bank account debit to asset account. Second, you need to do the lease accounting, correct? And if the other party is a buyer lessor, other party has to do the purchase accounting, then other party has to do the lease accounting in the books of the lessor, whether it is operating lease or finance lease, he has to do that accounting. Is it that simple? Is it that simple? You know, there is a concept of substance over form, right? Why this seller has sold that asset to the buyer and immediately get the asset on a lease basis, right? Why? What was the need for selling that asset? This company, which means myself, I was already running my office from that building, right? That building belongs to me. So why I have entered into such a transaction where I'm selling my asset, in spite of the fact I'm continue to using that asset. I'm continuing to use that asset, right? So Hemant is right, due to requirement of some funds, because I was in need of some funds and nobody, since Vignesh does not know me. So I requested Vignesh that Vignesh, I need 50 lakh rupees. So Vignesh told, sir, how can I give you 50 lakh rupees? I don't know you. I only knows you due to these virtual classes. Okay. So we never met. How can I give you 50 lakh rupees? I told Vignesh, okay, let's do one thing. Let's do one thing. So I am selling my property to you, right? So I'm transferring my papers to you, ownership to you for that building. Okay. And so Vignesh told me, sir, even though if you will sold this asset to me, what is the use of this asset to me? Right. I told Vignesh not to worry. I need this asset and enter into an arrangement where you can put non-cancelable lease for 20 years. Okay, means you have purchased this asset at 50 lakh rupees. I got 50 lakh rupees, and you can lease out this asset to me. I will pay you lease rentals over the life of the arrangement. So friends, it is important to see here whether this transaction is a sale, purchase and lease transaction, or whether this transaction is a funding transaction, right? Where kind of the asset is given as a pledge, as a mortgage, and one party is getting money from another party, right? So we need to check the substance of the transaction. What is the substance of the transaction? Correct? Is it a loan transaction? Is it a funding transaction? Or is it actually a sale transaction coupled with the lease transaction? Correct? So friends, in this case, we need to check two aspects. Please confirm if my Excel file is visible to everyone. Please confirm if it is visible to everyone.
Visible, sir.
Okay. Sale and leaseback transactions. Sale and leaseback transaction. Very important from the exam perspective. Very important. And this concept is considered as one of the complex concept in Ind AS 116. But I can guarantee you, after half an hour, when I'll complete this entire concept with the help of illustration in ICAI study material, you will be able to understand it in a very light manner and in a great manner. I can guarantee you. Sale and leaseback transaction. What is a sale and leaseback transaction? Sale and leaseback transaction means where A Limited is selling the asset to B Limited. A Limited is selling the asset to B Limited. Okay. This is A Limited, this is B Limited. So A Limited is selling the asset, selling the building to B Limited. So in this case, what is A? A become the seller. A become the seller. What is B? B become the buyer. Correct? B become the buyer. Again, this B Limited has lease out. This B Limited has lease out this asset to A. This B Limited has lease out this asset to A. This B Limited has lease out this asset to A Limited. Okay. So what this B becomes? This B becomes lessor. And what this A become? A become the lessee. In nutshell, A Limited, B Limited lease out the building to A. A Limited become the seller lessee. B Limited become the buyer lessor. A Limited become the seller lessee and B become the buyer lessor. Okay. B become the buyer lessor. Friends, standard says that whether it is going by the substance, आप substance में जाकर देखो, going by the substance, whether it is a loan transaction or whether it is a sale and leaseback transaction, you need to go into the substance and check that, right? क्या ये पूरी ट्रांजेक्शन पहले उसको बेचा और फिर वापस से लीज पे लिया, क्या ये पूरी ट्रांजेक्शन पेपर पे है, और इज इट एक्चुअल ट्रांजेक्शन, So standard says that there are two scenarios. Scenario number one. The seller has not transferred the control to the buyer. Right? The seller has not transferred the control to the buyer. If the seller has not transferred the control to the buyer, tell me, is it a sale purchase transaction or is it a funding transaction? You guys,
Funding.
you guys have already covered Ind AS 115. You remember in Ind AS 115 what we have discussed? In Ind AS 115, so when you are doing a sale, right? When you are doing a sale, you are recognizing a revenue, you are recognizing a consideration. When you are recognizing a consideration, when the control is transferred to the buyer. If the control is not transferred, it means, and we understood the control in Ind AS 115, in Ind AS 116, control is not transferred means I have sold this asset to you. I have sold my asset to Vignesh, but it is me who is taking the decision that how this asset is going to be used, in what manner this asset is going to be used, for what purposes this asset is going to be used. So I am managing, I am discussing, I am directing the control of this asset. Do you think is it an actual sale? Because if it would have been the actual sale, it is Vignesh who is controlling the use of that asset, right? It is Vignesh. But I have sold the asset to Vignesh. It means that sale is largely on the paper, not in the substance, right? I have sold the asset to Vignesh just to get the money from him. And I have kind of a mortgage this asset. And this is not a sale transaction. This is a kind of loan transaction. Sir, this is a funding transaction. But sir, since he has lease back, so he is giving me lease rent every month. So what is that? That is a EMI. What is that? That is a EMI. That is a payment of installment of the loan, right? So friends, if the seller has not transferred the control to the buyer, then what? Then what?
It is a funding.
It is a funding transaction. It is a loan transaction under Ind AS 109. It is a loan transaction under Ind AS 109. This transaction is not a sale and leaseback transaction. And this is a loan transaction under Ind AS 109, financial instruments, right? Friends, I have actually sold this asset to Vignesh, right? And I have also transferred the control to the buyer, to Vignesh, right? The seller has transferred the control to the buyer. It is Vignesh who can take this decision, right? So Vignesh is the real owner of this asset. He will become the real owner of this asset. So if the seller has transferred the control to the buyer. If the seller has transferred the control to the buyer, in that case, this transaction will be considered as a sale and leaseback transaction. Now the question arises, how to do the accounting in case of a sale and leaseback transaction? That is more important, largely in the books of the seller lessee, right? Friends, for example, I was holding a building, okay? I was the owner of that building. The life of the building is 50 years. I am in urgent need of the funds, okay? I have sold that building to Vignesh for rupees 50 lakhs. The life of the building is 50 years, okay? First, I have sold that building to Vignesh. So what I have done, that building was in my books of account. What accounting entry I need to pass when I have sold that building?
I will de-recognize the asset.
I have to de-recognize the asset. It means I have to debit bank and credit asset, be it a PP or be it an investment property. So मैं क्या करूंगा? Debit asset को करूंगा, sorry, debit bank को करूंगा, credit asset को करूंगा. It means I am de-recognizing my asset in the books of accounts. Correct? I am de-recognizing. So friends, while the life is 50 years, but I need this asset only for 10 years. I need this asset only for 10 years, right? I have to run my office for next 10 years in this building. So I have leased back that asset. I have leased back. I got this asset for 10 years. Okay. I got this asset for 10 years, right? So friends, I have de-recognized one asset and I got the asset on a lease back, on a lease basis. So I have to recognize one asset. I have to recognize right of use asset as a lease transaction, correct? But the question is, at what value I have to recognize right of use asset, right? So we are going to discuss those nuances in the accounting in the books of the seller lessee, right? Friends, let's discuss how this accounting will happen, right? Accounting in the books of seller lessee, right? Accounting in the books of seller lessee. I will start this discussion with the help of an example, right? Then I'll come back to the illustration and then I will tell you the steps, okay? Example. A Limited sold the asset and got the asset back on a lease basis. On a lease basis for 10 years. Okay. The following information is given. The following information is given in this context. What is the information which is given? Carrying value of the asset in the books of A Limited. Carrying value of the asset. Carrying value of the asset is, for example, 20 lakhs. Okay. Fair value of the asset. When you are selling this asset, so you have to see the fair value of the asset as well. Are you selling the asset on a market price or are you selling this asset at a lower than market price, higher than market price? Okay. So fair value of the asset was 30 lakh rupees. Okay. And sale price is also, it is at a market value. It is at a market value. Sale price is also 30 lakh rupees, right? Sale price is also 30 lakh rupees. Carrying value of the asset is 20 lakh rupees. Fair value of the asset is 30 lakh rupees. Sale price is also 30 lakh rupees. Okay. The present value of the lease payments for 10 years is how much? Let's say it comes out at 15 lakhs rupees. Is 15 lakhs. The PV of the lease payments for 10 years is 15 lakh rupees. Okay. Pass the necessary entry along with computation in the books of seller lessee. Anyone who has not understood the question? Anyone who has not understood the question? Everyone has understood the question? Yeah, very simple. A Limited has sold the asset and got the asset back on a lease basis for 10 years. The following information is given. Carrying value of the asset is 20 lakh rupees. Carrying value of this PP is 20 lakh rupees. The fair value, market value is 30 lakh rupees. The sale price is also 30 lakh rupees. The present value of the lease payment for 10 years is 15 lakh rupees. Pass the necessary entries along with the computation in the books of the seller lessee. Right. What is the first entry I need to pass? And this transaction, this sale price is at fair value, right? This sale price is equal to fair value of the asset. It means whatever is the market price, I'm getting that market price. Okay. What is the first entry?
Bank account debit.
Bank account debit. Very good. Bank account debit. Can you guys help me in passing this entry? Bank account debit by what amount? What is the
30
amount?
lakhs.
30
30
lakh.
lakhs.
30 lakh we are getting. Bank account debit. Then to what?
To asset.
To asset. To asset. Let's say it's building. Okay. To asset building. Let me write A Limited sold the building. What is the value of the asset? At
20
what?
lakh.
20
20
lakh.
lakh.
So we have to credit the carrying value. जो value books में आ रही है मैं उसको credit करूंगा. Okay. So bank account debit to asset. What is the other entries? This is one transaction. You have to see this transaction in entirety, right? Not profit. Shall I do 2 P&L 10 lakh rupees?
Yes, sir.
See, in this transaction, you have to understood that this transaction is one transaction. Okay. This transaction is one transaction. The seller is selling the asset and getting it on a lease basis. Going by the substance, do you think that it is a separate sale transaction and it is a separate lease transaction?
No, sir. We have
If-
to debit our right on use asset.
If A Limited has to, if A Limited is needing this asset for 10 years, why A Limited has sold this asset right now? Why A Limited has sold this asset right now? It means A Limited is in the need of the funds and A Limited also wants to keep some rights relating to this asset. Also, right? A Limited also wants to keep some right relating to this asset. A Limited has not sold. A Limited has not transferred the entire rights relating to this asset. Correct? So, this entire transactions has been managed. This entire transaction has been arranged as one transaction that you will pay me upfront this much amount. Okay. I will pay you the lease rental of this much amount. So whenever practically this sale and leaseback happens, this happens as a single transaction. Single transaction means every small joints and nuts has to be discussed as a one transaction. What is the total amount which you will pay me? What is the total lease rental which I'll pay you back, right? So this is a sale and leaseback transaction. This is not a plain vanilla separate sale and separate leaseback, right? This is kind of a mixed transaction, which is a mix of what? Mix of Ind AS 115 and Ind AS 116. Okay. So bank account debit to asset account. Okay. Bank account debit be amount received. Asset credit. Asset credit. Asset derecognized. PP derecognized. Then this entity is entering into a leaseback transaction. So there is a present value of the lease payment for 10 years is 15 lakh.
Lease liability.
To lease liability. Okay, to lease liability. The A Limited, this entity is required to pay 15 lakh rupees over the next 10 years. Okay. Lease liability recognized. Lease liability recognized. Correct. Lease liability recognized. Friends, the carrying value of the asset was 20 lakh. The fair value of the asset is 30 lakh, right? So carrying value is the value. Carrying value is the value which was recorded in the books of account. Which was recorded in the books of account. This asset was recorded in the books of account. When the company has sold this asset, when the company has sold this asset, who has unmuted himself or herself? I'm getting some noise from some students. Okay, friends. So this PP is derecognized, but what is the asset which is going to be recognized? Right of use asset. Right of use asset account debit. Right of use asset account debit. But the question is, what is the value of this right of use asset? What is the value of this right of use asset? And friends, Here is what you need to do the working. Friends, the value of the right of use asset is lease liability multiply by carrying value divide by fair value. Means whatever I am paying to the buyer lessor, whatever I am paying to the lessor, नॉर्मली मेरा लेसी की बुक्स में नॉर्मली मेरा आरओयू क्या होता है? व्हाट इज द आरओयू इन द बुक्स ऑफ द लेसी? आरओयू इज इक्वल टू प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ द लीज पेमेंट्स, करेक्ट? ROU is equal to present value of the lease payments, right? Here, I am paying a lease rental of 15 lakh rupees over the period of 10 years. Okay. And I have de-recognized one asset, which is 20 lakh rupee in my books of accounts. Okay. But the same asset I'm using also. So standard says that in this case, you have to do some adjustment in right of use asset. And upfront, you cannot take the entire amount of 15 lakh as a right of use asset. You have to take the right of use asset as a lease liability multiplied by carrying value divided by fair value. Okay. So what is my lease liability? 15 lakh is my lease liability. Multiply by 20 divided by 30. This will be my right of use asset value. Okay. Lease liability multiply by carrying value divided by fair value. Now, what is my debit and what is my credit? 40 is my debit, 35 is my credit. So what is the differential amount? Where the differential amount will go? To what? To
P&L.
P&L. To gain on sale and lease back. To gain on sale and lease back. Credit. How much? 5 lakh rupees, correct? This is balancing figure. Balancing figure. Friends, this is what you need to do in the sale and leaseback transaction in the books of the seller lessee. This is the only adjustment which is required, right? So this is not 10 lakh rupee which is recognized as a profit, because you are also retaining the asset. You are also retaining the asset. Okay. So friends, you have sold the asset. Okay. So understood the entire transaction. You got 30 lakh rupees upfront. Okay. In lieu of 30 lakh rupees, what you have to pay? You have to de-recognize your asset. You are getting 30 lakh rupees. आपको 30 lakh rupees मिल गए. आपने उस बिल्डिंग को बेच दिया. You got 30 lakh rupees. जो 30 lakh rupees आपको मिले उसके बदले में what are your obligation? Your obligation is to deliver the asset. PP. आपको PP देना है. Your obligation is to pay the lease rentals. Okay. Your obligation is to pay the lease rental. You are getting 30 lakh and in lieu of 30 lakh, you have to de-recognize your PP. You have to assume an obligation of 15 lakh rupees of lease liability, right? ये 30 lakh rupees आपके बैंक में आए. Bank 30 lakh, but you have de-recognized your asset. You have to give this asset. You have to assume a lease liability also. Okay. Right? And you are also getting a right to use this asset for a period of 10 years. So what is the value of this right to use? The value of this right to use is not 15 lakh rupees. Right? The right of use is not 15 lakh rupees. Okay. What is my right of use? My right of use is 15 lakh, whatever I am going to pay as a lease rental, multiply by carrying value, divide by fair value. So I have to capitalize my asset in the proportion of the carrying value divided by fair value. Okay. That what is the percentage of my carrying value as of today? So the fair value is 30 lakh. My carrying value is 20 lakh. It means almost 70% is the value of my asset in comparison to market value. Okay. So whatever I'm paying, 15 lakh rupees, 70% is the value of right of use asset, which is coming out at 10 lakh rupees, right? So the differential of this entire transaction will be considered as a profit. The net is the profit in this entire transaction. Okay. Is that clear? Is that clear to everyone? Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now, let's discuss another example. This was a simple example, but in exam, normally this example will come. Okay. Which is little bit complex from the earlier example. A Limited sold the building and got the asset back on a lease basis for 10 years. The following information is given. Carrying value of the asset is 20 lakh. Fair value of the asset is 30 lakh. Sale price is 35 lakh. The PV of the lease payment for 10 years is 15 lakhs. Okay. Pass the necessary entry along with computation in the books of the seller lessee. What is the difference in the first and second example?
Sale price is not equal to the fair value of the asset.
In this example, sale price was equal to fair value. But in this example, sale price is greater than fair value, right? ये difference है ना इन दोनों examples में?
Yes, sir.
In दोनों example में this is the difference. Sale price is greater than the fair value. Friends, I went to Hemant and I told Hemant I need money. Hemant told sir, I don't know you. I only took virtual classes, and on the basis of virtual classes, I cannot pay you this, kind of 30-40 lakh rupees. I told Hemant, okay, Hemant, let me sell my building to you. Okay. So Hemant told that, okay, sir, what is the value of this building? So the market price comes out at 30 lakh rupees. But I told Hemant, I need 35 lakh rupees. Right. So I sold this building to Hemant at 35 lakh rupees. Right. Market price was 30 lakh rupees. Sold this building to Hemant at 35 lakh rupees. Friends, in this transaction, going by the substance, why he will pay me more than the market value? Why he will pay me more than the market value? It means what is over and above of 30 lakh? What is this 5 lakh rupees?
Finance, sir.
It is finance. It is core finance. It is additional finance. It is loan. And how this lessee will repay this loan? The payment will inbuilt in the lease liability. Correct? The payment will inbuilt in the lease liability. I took the same example. The PV of the lease payment for 10 years is 15 lakh. Let's take this example as a 18 lakhs. Okay. So again, just think about what this entity is getting. A Limited is getting 35 lakh. What A Limited is getting? 35 lakh. What A Limited is obligated to pay? Asset, second, lease liability, which is 18 lakh, right? So this 35 lakh, which is received by A Limited is paying the asset. A Limited is also paying the lease liability. It means this loan amount, the installments is inbuilt in that lease payment, क्योंकि lease payment ही देनी और तो कुछ लिखा नहीं है इस क्वेश्चन में, और मार्केट वैल्यू से ज्यादा मिला है पैसा. Why you will pay more than the market value? It means there is an additional financing, there is a loan, correct? So in this question, how will we solve this question when the sale price is greater than fair value? Normally, if this kind of a question, if the question tests you on the sale and leaseback, so 99% these kind of question will come into the exam, right? I am touching on the concept. I'll come to the illustration of study material. Okay. Solution. What is the first entry? Tell me, what is the first entry which I need to pass? Bank account debit. Yes, bank account debit. Can anyone help me in passing the entry? Wherever you can just reach out. Can you help me in passing the entry? Bank account debit. What is the next entry?
Building
Asset account
to
credit.
building.
2 building. Bank account debit 2 building. 2 asset. Can I write this this as an asset? 2 asset building. Okay, 20 lakh rupees. Correct. What is the next entry?
Lease liability.
So lease liability
True.
18 lakhs.
To lease liability. Okay. To lease liability. Okay. Credit. What is my lease liability?
18 lakhs.
18 lakh is my lease liability. Okay. Is there any other entry also? Is there any other entry also?
Right of use asset.
Okay. Whether there is any funding in this case? Whether
Yes,
there is
sir.
any funding in this case?
No.
Yeah. So what is the funding in this case? इस केस में कोई फंडिंग है क्या?
5 lakhs, sir.
5 लाख. ओके. अब ये जो 5 लाख है, लेट्स से if I will write, shall I write this as a loan to financial liability to loan? Can I credit this loan? I got 35 lakh rupees. So this 5 lakh rupees I got as a loan. Okay. This 5 lakh rupees I got as a loan.
But it is already included in the lease liability now, sir.
Yes. Yes. That is what I want to highlight. So don't you think if you will credit lease liability 18 lakh, how this lease liability will knock off? This lease liability will be knocked off from the lease payments. But if additionally you will also pass a credit of 5 lakh rupees as a loan, how this loan will be knocked off? Because this A Limited has to pay 18 lakh rupees only. So how this A Limited is making a settlement? A Limited is making a settlement by way of lease payments, right? And the present value of lease payment is 18 lakh. So friends, in these cases where sale price is greater than fair value, where there is a loan element, where there is a financing element, what you need to do? You need to credit your lease liability, not at 18 lakh. You have to credit your lease liability at 13 lakh, right? This is 18 minus 3. 18 minus 3. Okay. And this is, sorry, 18 minus 5. Okay. And this is your loan is your 5 lakh. Okay. So we have done the obligation recording, which is to lease liability to loan. So I have segregated my obligation, my 18 lakh rupees into 2 elements. One is 13 and one is 5. The total is 18. And I've de-recognized my asset also, and I've debited my bank also. What is the next entry? Help me with the next entry.
Yes, okay.
What is the next entry? Right of use asset. What is the value of the right of use asset? How this right of use asset is going to be measured? What is my present value of lease liability excluding loan component? The loan component I need to pay. So my right of use asset.
So, like we calculated in earlier example, we will compare that carrying value with fair value.
Yes. So what is the value of my right of use asset? Present value of lease liability. Present value of lease liability. 18 or 13? 18 or 13?
13.
Excluding loan component. Excluding loan component. So what is that? 13 lakh. Multiply by carrying value, divide by fair value. Multiply by carrying value, divide by fair value. So what is my present value of lease liability? 13 lakh. Multiply by carrying value. What is the carrying value? 20 lakh. What is the fair value? 30 lakh. Correct? So 8.667. I hope this is clear to everyone. Yeah. So my total debit is 43.67. What is my total credit? 38. So my debit is more than the credit. So what is the balancing figure? What is the balancing figure? The balancing figure is to P&L, to gain on sale and leaseback transaction. To gain on sale and leaseback transaction. This is credit. How much? How much will be the credit? Equal to sum of debit minus sum of credits. 5.67. This is your sale and leaseback transaction. Okay. This is your sale and leaseback gain. And this is your balancing figure. So friends, this sale and leaseback transaction is largely a substance-based transaction where you have to record your gain or loss after taking the entire transaction as a whole. And you have understood why this is required, because whenever the seller is selling the asset, the seller is planning or seller is streamlining that how much rights I need to retain and how much payment I need to refund you, okay, by way of the lease payments. So you have to make out that what is my gain on the actual rights transferred, right? Mera gain kitna hai right transferred pe, okay? So what is this gain? This gain is on rights transferred. For example, the life of the asset is 50 years and I'm taking that asset on a lease basis for 10 years. If I would have held the asset, then what was the period for which I will enjoy the asset? अगर मैं एसेट का ओनर हूं और अगर मैं इस एसेट को बेचता नहीं तो कितने लाइफ तक एंजॉय करता उस एसेट को? 50 years, अगर 50 ईयर की लाइफ है तो. बट सिंस आई हैव सोल्ड द एसेट and I got the asset on a lease basis for 10 years. So it means how much period I am foregoing, how much period I am not using, not utilizing the asset. 40 years. I am retaining the right to use the asset for 10 years and I am foregoing. I am transferring my rights for using the that asset for 40 years. So how much gain I need to recognize? The gain I need to recognize, the proportionate gain I need to recognize to the extent I have transferred my right, to the extent I have transferred my right. Okay. So this gain on sale and leaseback is typically the gain on assets sold, right? Gain on rights transferred. Have you understood this thing? Have you understood or you haven't understood?
Can you please
Understood?
repeat it, sir?
Sorry.
Can you please repeat it, sir?
Yeah.
Last part.
So basically what I'm saying, in sale and leaseback transaction, the seller is largely in the need of money. The seller is selling the asset and seller is also using the asset. Okay. So typically what is the gain which is there? When the gain will arise? So this gain pertains to the period for which the seller has transferred the right. For example, I am the seller. So I have a building. The life of the building is 50 years. Okay. I have sold the building to the buyer. And again, I got the building on a lease basis from the buyer. Right. But the period of lease is only 10 years. It means out of 50 years, I'm retaining the right to use that building for 10 years. Correct. And I'm transferring the rights. I'm transferring the rights to use for 40 years. मतलब मैं सिर्फ 10 years यूज करूंगा. If I would be the owner, if I would have been continue to become the owner of the asset, I will use the asset for 50 years. But here I have sold the asset and taken it on a lease basis. I am only using the asset for 10 years. Means I am foregoing the rights to use that asset for 40 years. I am transferring my right. I am selling my rights to sell the asset. I am transferring my right. I am selling my right to use the asset for 40 years. So what is this gain? This gain pertains to the rights transferred. मेरा rights transferred करने पे कितना gain आ रहा है? This gain pertains to that thing. Okay, this is what it is there, right? In the practical world, the sale value, the lease payments, everything is dependent on each other, right? It's not a single transaction. It is depending on each other. Correct? For example, the seller needs more money. The seller will say that it doesn't matter, market price is 30 lakh. Please pay me 40 lakh. The buyer will tell you that why I'll pay you 40 lakh rupees, why I'll pay you 10 lakh rupees extra. Seller will say that, okay, I need finance. So give me that loan and I will repay that money as a part of the lease payments. Okay. So this entire thing is interrelated. How much rights you are retaining, it is right of use asset. the asset which you are debiting. And what is the gain? The gain is on the rights transferred. Understood that? Have you understood that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So typically from the examination perspective, my dear friends, when you are acting as a seller lessee, first of all, see what money you are getting. Bank account debit. Then credit whatever is there in your books of accounts, be it a PP or investment property, right? Then you need to check whether this question includes additional financing or not. For example, this question includes additional financing, and how will you be able to know that it is additional financing? If your sale price is more than the fair value of the asset, then the differential is the additional financing. Then credit loan. Then check what is my total lease payments, present value of the lease payment. For example, in this question, the present value of lease payment is 18 lakh, right? So in the entire life, you have to pay 18 lakh to the buyer-lessor. It means out of this 18 lakh, 5 lakh is already included as a loan liability. So 13 lakh is my lease element. 5 lakh is my financial liability element, Ind AS 109. But this 13 lakh is my lease element, lease 116 element. Okay. So then you need to credit your lease liability excluding loan component. Okay. Then you need to compute the right of use asset, the rights which you are retaining, and how much rights you are retaining. Whatever is your lease obligation, multiply by carrying value of the asset divided by fair value of the asset. Okay. For example, carrying value of the asset is 20 lakh and the fair value of the asset is 30 lakh. So 20 divided by 30 comes out at 70% roughly. I am paying 13 lakh rupees. So 13 lakh multiplied by 70% is something which you keep, which you are retaining the rights to use that asset, right? Okay. Is that clear? To loan liability. I hope it is clear now. Let's solve one question from ICAI study material. I have also written down the steps to recognize gain or loss on the rights transferred. Illustration number 42. Is there any of the formula used for ROU asset? Hemant, I have used the formula, na? Are you not able to see on this Excel file? I have used this formula, na? Present value of lease liability excluding loan component multiplied by carrying value divided by fair value. This is what I have used. Yeah. So Hemant, this bank account debit is pretty simple. Clear? To asset building, simple value. Lease liability excluding loan component, I have explained, right? And this gain on sale and leaseback is the balancing figure. Okay. Right of use asset. So logic is how much rights you are retaining. What you are paying for retaining the asset. 13 lakh in this example. And 13 lakh is the value, but how much rights you are retaining? So 13 lakh multiplied by the carrying value divided by the fair value. So you are retaining 70% of the right by paying 13 lakh rupees. Okay. So this is what it is. So basically you are paying 13 lakh. Out of 13 lakh, 8.67 is the value of the right of use asset. The value 8.67, right? So this, the buyer-lessor is giving you the right of use. Okay. If this sale transaction would not have been there, if this sale and leaseback transaction would not have been there, and it is a separate transaction, for example, I'm selling my asset to X and I'm getting another premises on a lease basis from Y. So what would be the value of my right of use asset? It will be 8.67, not 13. So accounting entry would be right of use asset to lease liability is 8.67. 8.67. Okay. Understood? Let's discuss illustration number 42. In the examination, this kind of illustration may come, right? And friends, with the help of this illustration, we will again discuss the accounting in the books of the seller lessee and accounting in the books of the buyer-lessor. So let me check, Anu, if it is illustration number 45 in the new study mate. So let me open the new study mate also. Just hold on for a minute.
Yes, sir, it's 45.
Okay. So let me open the study mat, right? Let's take the illustration from there. Yes, it's illustration number 45 in the new study mat. Okay, no problem. Please let me know if that study mat is visible. Is that visible, guys?
Visible, sir.
Study mat.
Yes, sir, visible.
An entity, seller, lessee. Just focus on the tone of this question, right? That how I am reading this question and how I am limited solving this question. An entity, seller, lessee sells a building to another entity, which is a buyer lessor, for cash of rupees 30 lakhs. Okay, so what is the sale price in this question? 30 lakh rupees. Immediately before the transaction, the building is carried at a cost of 15 lakh rupees. What is the carrying value?
15 lakhs.
15 lakh rupees. Sale price 30 lakh. Please note down these important metrics. Sale price is 30 lakh rupees. Carrying value is 15 lakh rupees. At the same time, seller lessee enters into a contract with buyer lessor for the right to use building for 20 years with annual payment of rupees 2 lakh payable at the end of each year. What is given here?
Annual lease payment has been given.
Annual lease payments payable at the end of the year, 2 lakh rupees per annum for 20 years. What is the total value of the lease payment? 40 lakh rupees. So we need to compute the present value, correct? आज की डेट में हमें present value निकालनी पड़ेगी ना उसकी, right? Okay. The terms and condition of the transaction are such that the transfer of building by seller lessee satisfies the requirement of determining when a performance obligation is satisfied in Ind AS 115 revenue from contract with the customer. Okay. The fair value of the building at the date of sale is 27 lakh. What is the fair value?
27 lakhs.
What is the sale price?
30 lakhs.
30 lakh is the sale price. Cash received is 30 lakh. And the market value is 27 lakh. Cash received is more than the market value. Why somebody will pay you more than the market price? It means
Financing company.
there is a financing component. It means there is a loan liability. 3 lakh is the loan liability. Okay. It means 3 lakh is the loan liability. Okay. Have you understood this question so far? Initial direct cost, if any, are to be ignored. Very good. The interest rate implicit in the lease is 12% per annum, which is readily determinable by the seller lessee. Okay. So discount rate is also given, which is 12%. What is the use of this discount rate?
Present value of lease payment calculation.
Present value of the lease payments. Okay. Buyer lessor classifies a lease of the building as an operating lease. One line is also given for the buyer lessor. So I believe we have to do the accounting in the books of buyer lessor also, right? How should the said transaction be accounted by the seller lessee and the buyer lessor? How should the said transaction be accounted by the seller lessee and the buyer lessor? Shall I give you the computation steps and accounting entries in the books of seller lessee and the buyer lessor? Shall I do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So please confirm if my Excel file is visible. Let's solve this question. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Illustration 45 of ICAI study material. Right. Illustration 45 of ICAI study material. Now, what are the informations which are given in this question? Can anyone help me? What are the information which is given in this question? Fair value is given. What is
Fair
the
value
what is the fair value?
27 lakhs.
27 lakhs. Just a minute. What is the sale price?
30 lakhs.
30 lakhs. What is the carrying value?
15 lakhs.
What is the carrying value? What is the lease term?
Lease term were 20 years lease period and annual year-end lease payment were 2 lakhs.
What is the annual lease rent? How much? 2 lakh.
2 lakhs.
Okay.
Discounted
Payable at the beginning,
end
end of the year. What is the discount rate which is given in the question?
12%.
12%.
12%. 12%. Okay. 12%. Okay. These are the information which is given in the question. And what is the demand of the question? Pass necessary accounting in the books of seller, lessee, and buyer, lessor. Seller, lessee, and buyer, lessor. Solution. Accounting in the books of seller, lessee. Step 1. What is my step 1? Step 1. Identify the cash received, okay, and element of identify the cash received and financing component if any. So what is the cash received in this case? What is the cash received?
30 lakh.
Cash received. Cash received is sale price. Okay.
30 lakhs.
Cash received, which is sale price. How much is the sale price? Okay, let me write here. Cash received. And what is my cash price? 30 lakh. And what is the financing component? Is there any
3 lakh.
financing component in this case? Yes. So financing component is also there in this case. Financing component. What is my financing component? Sale price
50
minus
lakhs.
fair value. So what is that? Sale price minus fair value. What is that?
3 lakh.
30 minus 30 lakh
27.
minus 27 lakh.
27.
3 lakh. 3 lakh. My financing component. Sale price minus fair value is my financing component, right? Is that clear? Any doubt, any problem in the first step? Very simple step. Very simple step, right? Shall I put the accounting entry also for this step? What is the accounting entry? Bank account debit. To asset, to liability. Step number 2. What is my step number 2? Derecognize. Derecognize the asset. Derecognizing the existing asset. Derecognize the existing asset. So what is the value of the existing asset by which you need to derecognize?
Carrying value 15 lakhs.
Carrying value. Derecognize the existing asset. So what is the carrying value of existing asset? Carrying value of existing asset. What is the carrying value of existing asset? 15 lakh rupees. Okay. Step number 3. What is my step number 3? I need to compute the lease liability also, because I'm getting money, I'm paying asset, and I'm also getting an obligation. What is that obligation? That obligation is present value of the future lease rentals. Correct? So compute the lease liability, or I would say compute the present value of the future lease payments, okay, or lease liability, whatever you called, right? How to compute this? कैसे करूँ compute?
1.12 into 2 lakh. मतलब raised to
Year,
power 20.
amount, then PV factor, then PV. यही है ना फॉर्मूला? ऐसे कर लूं, PV factor divide by multiply by amount. What is my year? How many year? 1, 2. year. What is the amount? Amount is 2 lakh payable at the end of the year. What is my present value factor? 1 divided by 1.12. Correct? Equal to divide by 1.12. Right? This multiply by this.
सर ये टेबल बनाना जरूरी है क्या? हम डायरेक्टली भी तो 2 लाख का
Directly भी कर सकते हैं. I just want to show it to all the students. I just want to go step by step. That is why I'm showing this calculation. Okay, but you can do directly as well, right? No need to prepare this table. So what is the value? 1493,889. For the sake of rounding off, can I take it as a 1494? ले लूं इसको?
Yes, sir.
Present value of lease payments. Okay, rounded off in 100, rounded off. What is rounded off? 14,94,000. 1494. So what is my present value of future lease payments? How much it is coming? How much it is coming?
1494.
Present value of future lease payments is 14,94,000. What is my actual lease liability? So out of this 1494, in this lifetime of 20 year, I have to pay 14,94,000. I mean to say the present value of the total obligation today is 14,94,000. This 14,94,000 includes
3
this
lakhs.
3 lakh or not?
Lakh finance. Yes,
Yes.
included.
So my loan liability, what is my additional financing? My additional financing is how much? 3 lakh. 3 lakh. So what is my lease liability? What is my lease liability?
11,94,000.
11,94,000. These are the two obligation I have. Correct? Any doubt up to this steps? Any doubt up to this part? कोई doubt है नहीं है? Any doubt, friends?
No, sir.
No doubt. Okay. Now I need to compute the value of right of use asset. I need to compute step number 4. Compute the right of use asset. Means value of the rights retained. Rights retained लिखूं ना लिखूं? कितने
Yes, sir.
rights मैंने retain कर लिए? Asset तो मेरी थी ना. I was using this asset. Then I sold this asset. But even though the time when I was sold this asset, even though at that point of time I was using that asset. So before and after sale, the asset was used by me. At no point of time, I have stopped using the asset. The asset was continued to be used by me. So what is my value of the right of use asset? What is my value of rights retained? क्या formula होगा?
So 15 lakh divided by 27,000.
Present value of future lease payment excluding finance
Loan.
component. मतलब बोल सकता हूँ actual lease liability multiply by carrying value divide by fair value. Okay. So what is my lease liability? 1194 multiply by what is my carrying value?
15 lakh.
15 lakh. Divide by what is my fair value?
27 lakh.
27 lakh. So this is the value of my, what? This is the value of my
Right of use asset.
right of use asset. Can you help me with the accounting entry now so that I can compute the gain? Step number 5. Compute gain / loss on sale of rights or transfer of rights. Correct? Transfer of rights in the asset. Okay. मतलब लाइफ 50 साल की थी, आपने 10 साल के लिए यूज करने के लिए आपने ले लिया, 20 साल के लिए आपने ले लिया, जो बचे हुए 30 साल हैं जो आपने ट्रांसफर कर दिए उस पे आपने कितना कमाया? एक्चुअल सेल. सो दिस विल बी योर व्हाट? This will be what? Balancing figure. What is the accounting entry? Quickly help me with the accounting entry. Bank account. Nobody will help me. Bank account debit. How much?
30 lakhs.
30 lakh, sir.
30 lakh. Can you help me quickly? Bank account debit, then to what? To
Asset.
PP credit. How much is the value?
15 lakhs carrying amount.
15 lakh carrying value. Then what? To lease liability.
11,94,000.
To loan liability.
3 lakh.
1194. 3 lakh. Okay. Then right of use asset. Right of use asset. How much is the right of use asset?
6,63,330.
Then what is the differential? So what is the differential? The total of credit is 29,94,000. The total of debit is 36,63,333. So my gain on rights transferred or gain on sale and leaseback. You can also write gain on sale and leaseback transaction. Gain on sale and leaseback transaction. Okay. Arrangement transaction. So whatever you will write, that is absolutely fine. What is the number? Number क्या है ये?
669,333.
669,333. Okay. This is my balancing figure, correct? 669,333. Balancing figure. Anyone who is not able to understood this question? Anyone who is not able to understand this question? This is my accounting entry. Accounting entry. Accounting entry at the time of sale. Okay. Sorry. Accounting entry at the time of sale. Any question? Anyone who is not able to understand these steps? Very simple steps. Sale and leaseback. What difficult is sale and leaseback? Yeah. If you have understood this question, then let's move forward. This is the accounting entry at the time of sale and leaseback, right? ये तो commencement date की accounting entry है. Accounting entry at the time of sale and on the commencement date, correct? And on the commencement date. Now, what is the subsequent accounting entries? What is the subsequent entries? अब क्या होगा? Subsequent entries क्या होंगी? ये जो
Depreciation and
right of
all.
use asset और lease liability है, उसके subsequent entry क्या होंगी?
Depreciation and
Right of use
and
asset will be depreciated over which period?
10 years.
10 year, 20 year.
20 years.
Right of
20
use
years.
asset. In the question, the life is 20 year ना, 20 साल का दिया है payment का term. Right of use
20
asset will be depreciated over the period of 20 years. What is accounting entry? Depreciation. Account debit
to accumulated depreciation.
to accumulated depreciation.
33/67.
663 divided by 20. ये तो क्लियर है ना, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है इसमें. इसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम तो नहीं है. Now the actual thrill comes, lease liability. So the first entry we have done, for subsequently now the second entry. Lease liability पे क्या करूं?
इंटरेस्ट दिखाते टाइम हमको एनुअल पेमेंट का दो
Interest expense on lease liability. Interest expense on lease liability. So इसका lease liability का शेड्यूल बनाना पड़ेगा मुझे. बनाना पड़ेगा ना?
Yes, sir.
Schedule of lease liability. Schedule of lease liability. Year, opening balance, then interest expense, then closing balance. Year. Now you need to help me here. What is my opening balance of lease liability? Is it 1194 or 1494?
11/19.
What is the opening balance of lease liability? 1194 or 1494? क्या होगा?
11,94,000.
11,94,000. Okay. 11,94,000. 11,94,000. So my interest will be charged at what value? इसी वैल्यू पे होगा into 12%. Correct? Then my payments. Why you guys have not told me that, sir, you have not written this lease payment? Yeah. Lease. What is my lease payment here? I am paying 2 lakh rupees every year. Whether this 1194 is the present value of 2 lakh rupees every year? No, the present value was 1494. So how much lease payment I need to take here?
Proportionately.
Proportionately. Yes, very good. So first of all, you need to allocate. You need to also allocate. When you have allocated this part, calculate present value future lease payment. When you have allocated loan liability and lease liability, right? Loan liability and lease liability. Here, please also allocate here the payment, annual payment, total annual lease payment. What is my total annual lease payment? 2 lakh. Total annual lease payment तो 2 lakh है ना? Total annual. So not total annual lease payment, sorry. Annual lease payment, right? Annual lease payment. So what is my lease payment? Lease payment. Payment relates to payment relating to loan and payment relating to lease liability. Payment relating to loan and payment relating to lease liability. टू लीज लाइबिलिटी। कितनी होगी पेमेंट रिलेटिंग टू लोन? 2 लाख मल्टीप्लाई बाय 3
3
लाख
lakh,
डिवाइड बाय
14 lakhs 90.
94. What is my payment relating to liability? 2 lakh multiply by 1194 divide by 1494. Right? This will be proportionate. Okay, this will be proportionate. Right? So you can do one thing. Either you can split this or you can do schedule of lease liability and loan liability, right? Because the payment is single payment. The payment is paying as going as an EMI. So you can do one thing also, because ultimately you have to debit your interest on both the items, correct? सही है ना?
Yes, sir.
तो आप एक काम और कर सकते हो, सीधा सीधा आपने यहाँ ओपनिंग बैलेंस पूरा पूरा ले लो लाइबिलिटी का. सो दिस इज लाइबिलिटी, टोटल लाइबिलिटी. दिस इज इंटरेस्ट एक्सपेंस. दिस इज माय लीज पेमेंट. सर फिर उसको एलोकेट करने का फायदा क्या हुआ? आई विल टेल यू. Then my lease payment. What is my lease payment? My lease payment is how much? 2 lakh rupees. What is my closing balance? My closing balance is this plus this plus this. Okay. Then this will become my opening balance. Again, same thing. Shall I drag this to the last level? इसको last
Yes.
level तक drag कर दूं मैं?
Yes, sir.
Sir, this has not become zero. 1073 rupees have come.
तो एक और कॉलम ऐड करना पड़ेगा ना?
कौन सा?
लोन रिपेमेंट का अलग होगा.
लोन रीपेमेंट का अलग क्यों होगा?
So
So why
lease,
there is a separate loan repayment? In this entire 2 lakh rupees, this loan repayment is also included, na?
yes sir.
What we are paying? We are paying only lease liability. We are only paying lease payment of 2 lakh rupees per annum, right? So if you can see this 2 lakh, the total present value of this 2 lakh was how much? 14 lakh 94,000. Okay, 14 lakh 94,000. So we have reduced 3 lakh from 1494 and 1194. 1194 was my lease liability and 3 lakh was my loan liability. So यही तो है total present value 1494. ये किसकी present value है 1494? इस 2 lakh की annual payment की present value है ना. लोन की पेमेंट अलग से क्यों होगी? ये जो डिफरेंस 1073 का है, राउंडिंग ऑफ डिफरेंस है. दिस इज राउंडिंग ऑफ डिफरेंस. This is not something else. This is rounding of difference. So you can write plus 1073. Sorry, minus 1073. Okay. You can adjust in the last interest payment. No problem. So what is the accounting entry? आपने क्या किया है? आपने सबसे पहले what you have done. First of all, you have seen what you are going to pay as an annual rent, 2 lakh rupees for 20 years. What is the present value of that? 1494. What is the additional financing you have got? 3 lakh rupees. It means what is the actual lease liability? 1194. टोटल तो पेमेंट आपको यही करनी है ना, 2 लाख ओवर 20 ईयर्स, जिसका प्रेजेंट वैल्यू 1494 है. उसमें से 3 लाख तो सीधा सीधा निकल गया, राइट? Is that clear or clear?
Clear in mind,
Clear.
sir.
To liability. Here I am writing as a liability, right friends? To liability. कौन सा? Lease plus loan. Lease plus loan both. To interest expense to liability, right? इससे आपका बढ़ता जाएगा डेबिट क्रेडिट. Okay. For example, this is what in the first year, if I talk about the first year, this will be my interest expense. First year. Okay. Same entry you need to pass for 20 years. Then you need to repay. उसके बाद आप क्या करोगे? रीपे करोगे. Payment. What is the payment entry?
Lease liability to bank.
Liability. Only lease liability?
Plus
Liability.
loan.
Liability to what? Bank.
Bank.
कौन सी liability?
Lease plus loan.
Loan plus lease. Okay. Liability debit to bank. 2 lakh rupees. करेक्ट? समझ आ गया ये?
यस सर,
ये सिंपल था, बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स था ये?
सिंपल दो।
आप ये कॉन्सेप्ट्स, आप ये स्टेप्स याद रख पाओगे? देखा जाए तो अगर आप थोड़ा सा माइंड अप्लाई करो तो 70-80% तो आप पहले ही कर लोगे। द ओनली थिंग वेर यू गेट स्टक इज व्हाट? right of use asset calculation. Correct? What is that? That is present value of lease liability multiply by carrying value divide by fair value. Correct? बस उतना सा है। और उसके बाद आपका जो गेन और लॉस आएगा दैट इज द बैलेंसिंग फिगर। सर दिस इज द अकाउंटिंग इन द बुक्स ऑफ द सेलर लेसी। नाउ व्हाट इज द अकाउंटिंग इन द बुक्स ऑफ द बायर लेसोर? बायर लेसोर की बुक्स में क्या अकाउंटिंग होगी? Accounting in the books of the buyer lessor. Will you help me? What is the accounting in the books of the buyer lessor? क्या अकाउंटिंग होगी? बायर लेसोर को क्या करना पड़ेगा सबसे पहले?
असेट अकाउंट
Buyer
डालते
lessor will initially recognize what accounting entry buyer lessor will do? Initial recognition. Initial recognition. बायर क्या करेगा? पीपी रिकॉग्नाइज करेगा ना, बिल्डिंग पीपी अकाउंट डेबिट, बिल्डिंग अकाउंट डेबिट, बिल्डिंग। It could be PP, it could be investment property also. But since buyer has leased out, so it could be investment property. Building account debit. What is the value of building?
27
Buyer has
lakh,
paid 30 lakh rupees. Buyer has
27
paid 30 lakh rupees to bank. So buyer ने कितने पे किए? 30 लाख रुपीस पे किया। क्रेडिट क्या होगा? What is my credit?
30
मेरा
lakh,
बैंक कितने से क्रेडिट होगा? 30 लाख रुपीस से क्रेडिट होगा बैंक, because this buyer has paid 30 lakh rupees. My loan, sorry, my bank will be credited by 30 lakh rupees. But what is the value of the building?
27 lakh.
27 lakh. Fair value. What is the fair value of the asset acquired? Fair value of the asset acquired is how much? 27 lakh. And this buyer has also given a loan financial asset debit. Okay. How much? 3 lakh. This minus this. ठीक है ना, वो लाइबिलिटी दिखाएगा तो ये भी तो एसेट दिखाएगा ना। वो कह रहा है आई हैव टू रीपे द लोन एंड ही इज सेइंग आई हैव टू रिकवर द लोन। करेक्ट? ठीक है ना ये? दिस इज माय इनिशियल रिकॉग्निशन। व्हाट इज माय सब्सिक्वेंट अकाउंटिंग? अब सब्सिक्वेंट अकाउंटिंग क्या होगी ये तो समझ में आ गई बात। व्हाट इज माय सब्सिक्वेंट अकाउंटिंग?
Lease payments and depreciation.
सब्सिक्वेंट अकाउंटिंग। सो बायर क्या करेगा? इस बिल्डिंग को डेप्रिसिएट करेगा। सो लेसर विल डेप्रिसिएट द बिल्डिंग ओवर द यूजफुल लाइफ। करेक्ट? अब यूजफुल लाइफ इस क्वेश्चन में दी नहीं है बिल्डिंग की, but most importantly this life is more than 20 years, right? Lessor will depreciate this building over the useful life. The useful life is not given in the question. Correct? Second क्या होगा? क्या करेंगे? Lessor will recognize the lease rental on accrual basis since it is an operating lease. Correct? Operating lease है ना ये। Lessor will recognize the lease rental. Okay. Lessor will recognize the lease rental. What is the accounting entry for recognizing the lease rental? Every month bank account debit. Bank account debit to what? To lease rental account. To lease rental account. Lessor यही एंट्री करेगा ना, या अभी समझ नहीं आ रहा? What entry lessor will pass? Bank account debit to rent account ना? Income. This is the income for lessor.
Yes, sir.
Correct? So lessor कितने से करेगा? 2 लाख रुपीस आने हैं लेसोर के पास। लेसोर के पास 2 लाख रुपीस आने हैं। सो व्हाट इज द पोर्शन ऑफ लीज रेंटल? सी, फ्रॉम द लेसोर परस्पेक्टिव इफ यू विल सी, वन, लेसोर हैज टू डू द अकाउंटिंग ऑफ लोन रिसीवेबल एज पर इंडेस 109। Second, lessor has do the accounting for leases as a lease receivable. Lease receivable means lease rental, right? हमने ऊपर अभी निकाला था ना कि कितना पोर्शन है जो रेंट से रिलेटेड है, कितना पोर्शन लोन से रिलेटेड है, निकाला था हमने ऊपर 159,839. So lessor will do bank account debit to lease rental account 159,839. Third entry, what is the third entry lessor will pass? तीसरी एंट्री क्या होगी? Lessor will recognize the receipt of loan installment and interest income on the loan. Lessor will recognize interest income on the loan and receipt of what? Loan installment. अभी तो 2 लाख में से सिर्फ आपने एंट्री की है 1,60,000 की, 159,839 की. अब क्या करना पड़ेगा? रिमेनिंग 40,000 की एंट्री करनी पड़ेगी ना, और आपको इंटरेस्ट भी तो रिकॉग्नाइज करना पड़ेगा. दिस 40,000 यू आर पेइंग फॉर 20 ईयर. सो व्हाट इज 40,000 मल्टीप्लाई बाय 20? 8 lakh. 40,000 multiplied by 20 is 8 lakh, na? And what is the value of the loan? Lessor is getting 8 lakh rupees over a period of 20 years. But what is the value of the loan? 3 lakh. It means what is the differential? 5 lakh क्या है?
इंटरेस्ट है.
5 lakh is interest income. So how to compute this interest income? Simple formula. क्या करें? Same year. Opening balance, lease payment, closing balance, year. Opening interest income, instead of expense it is income, instead of lease payment it is loan, it is installment received.
मैं यही बोल रही थी, वो टेबल बनाते वक्त अगर कंबाइन कैलकुलेशन कर लेते तो अब यूजफुल होता.
Okay. Yes. Okay, but I wanted to show it separately in the books of the lessor, right? Because in the books of lessee it doesn't make much difference, but in the books of the lessor it will make a difference, right? But अगर वहां भी कर लेते तो सेम हम यूज कर सकते थे. You are right. Year, how many years? What is my opening balance of the loan? Loan asset 3 lakh. What is my interest income? 12%. ये 12% पे डिस्काउंटिंग की थी ना. What is my installment received? कितने की इंस्टॉलमेंट रिसीव होगी? ये तो बता दो फटाफट.
40,000.
40,161. Correct. Closing balance plus this. Okay. This will become your opening balance, interest income. Sorry. See, this has become 0. Adjust this small number in the last installment. What is the accounting entry? Let's say in the first year, what is the accounting entry? Bank account debit. बैंक कितने से डेबिट होगा? आप 160 से तो ऑलरेडी कर चुके हो. अब कितने से बैंक डेबिट करोगे?
4161.
4161. To what?
Loan.
To interest income.
Interest income.
Interest income कितने से क्रेडिट करोगे?
36,000.
36,000. बैलेंसिंग फिगर कहाँ जाएगी? टू प्रिंसिपल पेमेंट, टू लोन फाइनेंशियल एसेट. योर एसेट विल गो डाउन, राइट? ऐसे करके आपका एसेट 0 हो जाएगा थोड़े टाइम में. करेक्ट. This will be the accounting entry. Okay. I hope now you have understood the accounting in the books of the seller lessee and accounting in the books of the buyer lessor. Yes or no? Have you understood this entire accounting in the books of seller lessee and in the books of the buyer lessor in case of sale and leaseback transaction? So I have given you the concept. I have given you the accounting in the books of the seller lessee where sale price is equal to fair value, where sale price is greater than fair value. So I've also given you two small examples, and then I have also solved illustration number 45 of ICAI study material, where I have done the initial recognition and measurement and subsequent accounting. And then in the books of buyer-lessor, initial measurement and subsequent accounting. I've done both, right? I hope this is clear to each one of you. Any doubt, any question on this? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So friends, I have completed the sale and leaseback aspect. It's been 8:36 now. Let's have a 10 minutes break and we will start at 8:47. Okay. Thank you. Ashok ji, break start. So friends, we have covered sale and leaseback transaction accounting in the books of the seller lessee as well as in the books of the buyer lessor, right? I hope you all are comfortable with the sale and leaseback accounting. And let me tell you, this is considered as one of the most complex topic in Ind AS 116. Believe me, this is considered as one of the most complex topic in Ind AS 116, right? Yes. Yes, Anu. Yes. So, Zini, you are right. If you have understood this, and the only essence and the only key to solve this question is just move step by step, right? If you're able to move step by step, you will be able to solve this question, right? Otherwise, you will get stuck somewhere and you will get stuck in even the first item where you will do bank account debit to asset account, then to profit account, right? That is wrong. That is not right. Okay. So we have covered the sale and leaseback accounting. Friends, now let's talk about separation of lease and non-lease component. Separation of lease and non-lease component. What is meant by separation of lease and non-lease component? Okay. I am taking you back to the concept separation of lease and non-lease component. Separating components of a contract, right? Friends, for example, let's say A Limited is a lessee, right? A Limited took a machinery for 10 years on a lease basis, right? A Limited took a machinery on a lease basis for 10 years. A Limited told the lessor, listen, do one thing. You are giving me this machinery on a lease basis. Let's do one thing. Please also give me maintenance service. Please also provide me maintenance service, right? So I am moving you back to my Excel file and we are discussing separation of lease and non-lease component. Separation of lease and non-lease component, right? So A Limited has taken a machinery on a lease basis for 10 years. For 10 years. Right. A Limited also requested the lessor to provide the annual maintenance service. Provide the annual maintenance service. Okay. So in this question, in this example, what are the two components? What are the two components in this example? From the lessee perspective, what are the two components? From the lessee perspective, what are the two components?
Lease and maintenance.
Lease, so machinery, lease, and maintenance service. Right? Machinery lease and maintenance service. Okay. This machinery lease is covered under, it's a lease component. This is a lease component, correct? And this is a non-lease component. This is a non-lease component. Non-lease component. In non-lease component है ना service है. There is no underlying asset. In machinery lease there is an underlying asset. In maintenance service there is no underlying asset. वो तो service provide कर रहे हैं. So whenever there is a lease component, lessee has to apply Ind AS 116, okay? And lessee has to create right of use asset. Perfect. The lessee has to create right of use asset. For non-lease component, lessee has to accrue the expenses. Okay, accrue the expenses in the P&L. यही होगा ना? Lessee क्या करेगा? Expense accrue करेगा P&L में. Correct? Lessee will accrue the expenses in the P&L. This is what it is. This is what it is. From the lessor perspective, what will happen from the lessor perspective? Lessor के perspective से क्या होगा? Lessor is somebody who is giving this asset on a lease basis and who is also providing maintenance obligation. लेसोर के पर्सपेक्टिव से कौन कौन सी ऑब्लिगेशन है? मशीनरी को लीज पे देना और मेंटेनेंस सर्विस प्रोवाइड करना. आपने इंड एस 115 पढ़ा है ना? हैव यू हैड अ सेशन ऑन इंड एस 115? फ्रॉम whom?
Yes, sir.
From whom?
You.
Okay. Okay. So I have taught you Ind AS 115 and I have told you the seller has to apply Ind AS 115 for recognizing revenue. And revenue has to be recognized. You remember those 5 steps? Step number 1, identify the contract with the customer. Step number 2, identify the performance obligation, determine the performance obligation. Step number 3, identify the transaction price. Then you need to allocate the transaction price into the ratio of, allocate the transaction price into the ratio of what? Into the proportion of standalone selling price of the multiple performance obligation, correct? Then you need to recognize revenue over the period of time or at a point in time, correct? This is what we have learned in Ind AS 115. So friends, from the lessor perspective, if the lessor has given a machinery on a lease and maintenance service obligation, so this is a lease component and this is a non-lease component. So lessor has to apply Ind AS 116 and on this maintenance service, lessor has to apply Ind AS 115. Ind AS 116 and Ind AS 115, correct? So lessor has to accrue the revenue as per Ind AS 115 and lessor has to do the operating lease or finance lease accounting as per Ind AS 116. Okay. Lessor will not create ROU. If it is an operating lease, lessor will continue to depreciate the machinery and lessor will recognize the lease rental over the lease period on a straight line basis. If it is a finance lease, lessor will de-recognize the machinery and lessor will recognize the net investment in the lease. You understand net investment in the lease? What is a net investment in the lease? It is a finance lease receivable. What is a finance lease receivable? It is equal to present value of what?
Lease payments received.
Plus unguaranteed residual value, right?
Right.
Your finance lease receivable is equal to present value of future lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value. This is the formula of finance lease receivable, right? So if it is a finance lease, lessor will recognize finance lease receivable debit and credit is your asset, correct? So friends, moral of the story is the standard says that whenever there is a lease and non-lease component, it has to be separated. Why? Because for lease component accounting is different, for non-lease component accounting is different. Different, I mean to say, from the lessee perspective, it is a kind of a expense accrual accounting, right? And for the lease component, it is kind of a capitalization accounting where the lessee has to recognize right of use asset. Lessee has to capitalize right of use asset, correct? Correct, friends? Now the question is, sir, for example, in the same case, when you are saying this A Limited has taken a machinery on a lease basis for 10 years, right? The total annual payment is rupees 1 lakh. The total annual payment is rupees 1 lakh. Okay. The total annual payment is rupees 1 lakh. Correct. The total annual payment is rupees 1 lakh. Okay. Now there are two component machine from the lessee perspective. There are two component. This machinery lease and maintenance service. Okay. This lease component, non-lease component. How to identify? How to allocate this 1 lakh rupees? ये 1 लाख रुपीस का जो एनुअल पेमेंट है और ये लीज और नॉन लीज कंपोनेंट में आई नीड टू allocate. Why? Because for lease component I have to do the ROU accounting. So how can I allocate this? Standard says that allocate the total lease payment allocate the total lease payment in the ratio of standalone selling price of the components, right? Same way which we have discussed in Ind AS 115, same way. Okay, so allocate the total payment, just a minute. Allocate the total payment in the ratio of both the components, in the ratio of standalone selling price, okay, of the components. Correct? सही है? Perfect है? Sir, let's say that total annual payment is rupees 1 lakh. So how do we allocate this? For example, the standalone selling price, let's say the standalone selling price of lease, if I would have taken only the lease from this lessor, the standalone selling price of lease is, let's say, 80,000 rupees. 80,000 rupees. And maintenance service, if I would have taken maintenance service, or this lessor is providing the maintenance service to the other persons, to the other customer at rupees, the maintenance service for rupees 30,000. Right? So how do I allocate this? In the ratio of what? In the ratio of what? 80,000 is to 30,000. 80,000 is to 30,000. So 80 is to 30. So what is my annual payment? What is my annual payment? 1 lakh. 1 lakh multiply by 80 divided by 110. Correct? 1 lakh multiply by 30,000 divided by 110. Right? So this is my total payment. Now, what is the accounting entry? What is the accounting entry? For this 80,000, what you need to do? For this 80,000, which is 72,727. Your lease payment is how much? Lease payment is rupees 72,727 for 10 years, right? For 10 years. So you have to compute. What you need to do? You have to compute present value of lease payments, which will be equivalent to ROU, correct? And this ROU is going to be depreciated, and lease liability is going to be, interest is going to be charged on the lease liability, and then it has to be paid, right? And what about this non-lease component? Maintenance service. What is the accounting? Maintenance service expense account debit. Maintenance service expense account debit. Expense account debit to bank account. Can I write this bank account? To lessor to bank. Okay. Bank. Friends, this separation of lease and non-lease component is required, right? And on the lease component, Ind AS 116 is the standard which is applicable. But on the non-lease component, what happened? Ind AS on the non-lease component from the lessee side, no any standard is applicable. So it's a normal expense accrual principle. It's a normal expense accrual principle. From the lessor side, I agree. From the lessor side, on the lease component, Ind AS 116 is applicable. On the non-lease component, Ind AS 115 is applicable. But from the lessee side, there is no any standard for maintenance service. Okay. It's a normal accrual principle. It's a normal accrual principle. Friends, in this Ind AS 116, the standard has given you an exemption. The standard has given you an exemption. What exemption? Can anyone tell me what is that exemption? Ind AS 116 has given one exemption. Ind AS 116 has told that you can apply a practical expedient. What is meant by practical expedient? Ind AS 116 says that if it is difficult to segregate, to separate the lease and non-lease component, then consider the entire contract as a lease contract. What does it mean? It means you are not required to segregate this machinery and maintenance service separately. You can do this 1 lakh rupee of lease rental accounting, right? 1 lakh rupee of lease rental for the next 10 years. You can compute the ROU on the basis of present value of lease payment for 10 years, which is on the basis of 1 lakh rupees. And then you can depreciate ROU and you can also charge interest on lease liability, and then you can pay the lease liability. So this is one of the exemption which is given, right? While in examination, you will find this very simple, but in the real world, in the practical world, many times it may be difficult to segregate the lease and non-lease component. Then the allocation will become difficult and complex, and hence the standard has given you such practical expedient, such exemption. So note, what is the exemption which is given? Note, एग्जाम में आप ऐसा मत करना कि एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन आया और आपने एग्जेम्पशन तुरंत पहली लाइन में एग्जेम्पशन डाल दिया आपने और उसको क्या किया, नॉन लीज में कंपोनेंट में सेग्रीगेट नहीं किया. Don't do like that, because probably the examiner wants to examine, are you able to understand the concept of lease and non-lease component? Are you able to know that the rental, the payment, not rental, the payment has to be splitted between the lease and non-lease in the ratio of their standalone selling price, right? So note, lessee can avail an exemption and can opt for not to segregate, not to separate lease and non-lease component, and take the entire payment as lease rental. Okay, lease rental means can apply the entire Ind AS 116 ROU asset accounting on the entire payment. Okay, right? Is that clear to everyone? This concept of lease and non-lease component, is that clear to everyone, guys? Yeah. So let me take you on a question number 15. Is that question number 15 of the new study material also? Allocating contract consideration to lease and non-lease component. Yeah. Shall I cover this illustration? Yes or no? Karu is illustration ko? Sorry.
Yes,
It's
sir.
illustration number 15 na? In the new study material, it's illustration number 15 or different illustration?
Yes,
Can
sir.
you check?
Illustration 15.
15, okay. Yes, a lessee has entered. Just a minute. Yes. A lessee enters into a lease of an equipment. The contract stipulates the lessor will perform maintenance. The lessor will perform maintenance of the leased equipment and receive consideration for that maintenance service. The contract stipulates the lessor will perform maintenance of the leased equipment and receive consideration for that maintenance service. The contract includes the following fixed prices for the lease and non-lease component. Okay. So in the contract, the allocation is 80,000 for lease and the allocation is 10,000 for maintenance, then the total is 90,000. Assume the standalone prices cannot be readily observed. So the lessee make estimate maximizing the use of observable information of the lease and non-lease component as follows. So the standalone selling price is 85,000 for lease and 15,000 for maintenance, right? in the given scenario, assuming lessee has not opted for the practical expedient. Not opted the practical expedient means not opted the exemption. Okay. How will the lessee allocate the consideration to lease and non-lease component? Friends, have you understood, let's say, why these kind of accountings are given? Why these kind of accounting are given in this standard? Let's say I am the lessor, right? And for example, Pooja is lessee. So Pooja is taking this equipment on a lease basis from me. Okay. So Pooja is saying, sir, please give me this equipment and also provide maintenance service. I said, okay. Then we have made such an arrangement. I told Pooja that, Pooja, give me the rental of this equipment as, let's say, 80,000 rupees. And give me in the name of maintenance 10,000 rupees, right? So basically what we have agreed for 90,000 rupees. Okay. So Pooja told me that, sir, I will pay you total 90,000 rupees. मैं आपको 90,000 pay करूंगी. Okay. So I told her, okay, Pooja, not to worry, but do one thing. Lease के नाम पे मेरे को 80,000 pay करो and maintenance के नाम पे 10,000 pay करो. Correct. Then Pooja told me, sir, but maintenance is very, kind of expensive affair. Sir, maintenance took around 15,000 rupees. And normally this kind of, premise is also getting at 85,000 rupees. Okay. So I told Pooja, I understand, I know. I am giving you a discount on both the elements since you are getting this premises and this maintenance from me. So I am taking a total consideration of 90,000 and my request is to sign this agreement with 80,000 as lease and maintenance of 10,000, right? Tell me, what is the benefit to the lessee or the lessor when the lessee and lessor will keep on changing the amount as per their whims and fancies? What is the benefit? They can do the planning. For example, if I want to keep my EBITDA high, right? Earning before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization. I would like to and I wish to take more and more number to ROU asset and lease liability. Correct? यही होगा ना?
Yes, sir.
I will take more and more number. I will allocate more and more amount to the lease rental so that it will take the form and shape of ROU. And this ROU will be take the shape and form of depreciation and lease liability will take the form of interest payments. And I will keep my maintenance at a very low price so that this maintenance will be debited in the normal expense, other expense. Okay. So that my EBITDA will not be impacted. I will keep my maintenance at a low value. Okay. Or even though when you put more number to ROU and lease liability, so what happened in the initial year expense will be more, in the later year expense will be less. So you can plan accordingly. For example, if you are forcing higher profits and you want less profit, so you will put more and more item to lease. So basically you will plan, you will do the simulation, you will do the scenario analysis that how my number will look like. You will do permutation and combination, whether I should keep 70-20, whether I should keep 75-15, correct? So you do permutation and combination to plan and manage your numbers, right? Friends, that is why standard has told you whatever is the total amount, which is 90,000, you need to allocate in the ratio of standalone selling price of the lease and non-lease component. So this 90,000 has to be allocated in what ratio? This 90,000 has to be allocated in the what ratio? 85:15. This 90,000 multiply by 85% and 90,000 will multiply by 15%. This will be your value of lease and maintenance. This will be your value of lease and maintenance. Okay. Is that clear? Is that clear, my dear friends? Friends, from the lessor perspective, for example, lessor is charging you a lease rental, and lessor is also collecting a property tax from you. Correct? So lessor is saying, please give me a lease rental of rupees, let's say 5 lakh per annum. 5 lakh rupees lease rental. Please pay me this lease rental, and you need to pay me 50,000 for property taxes. Correct? 50,000 for property taxes. Friends, Ind AS 116 says that whether that component is individually beneficial, and independent of the other asset. Right? So when I am the lessee, I am paying the lease rental, and I'm also paying for the property taxes. Am I getting some additional benefit by paying the property taxes?
No.
Of course, no. I got a 3-bedroom house for which I am paying a rent of 5 lakh rupees. Tomorrow, if the government will waive property tax, still my rent will be 5 lakh rupees. Right? I mean to say, still I will be using this 3-bedroom house. Even though I'm paying a property taxes, again, I'm using a 3-bedroom house. I'm not getting some additional benefits, separate benefits, right? So standard says that in that case, you are not required to separate this lease and non-lease component. This entire amount has to be considered as a lease component. This 5,50,000 has to be recognized as a lease rental, has to be recognized as a lease payment. Okay, understood? But in this case, if the lessor is providing me the lease rental, providing me the lessor has given me the premises on a rent basis, on a lease basis, and lessor is also providing a maintenance service. So am I benefited? Am I getting some benefit when I'm getting this maintenance service?
Yes.
Of course, yes. अगर लेसोर से नहीं लेता, किसी और से लेनी पड़ती. करेक्ट? और अगर लेसोर से नहीं लेता, तो मेरा अगर डैमेज हो जाता, मेरा अगर मेंटेनेंस डैमेज हो जाता या रिपेयर चाहिए होती, तो उसके लिए आई नीड टू एक्सपेंस ऑफ. करेक्ट? सो I am getting an additional benefit by way of maintenance service, and hence it is a separate component. It is a separate non-lease component. Correct? Okay. Is that fine? So this is the concept of separation of lease and non-lease component. This is the concept of separation of lease and non-lease component. Correct? Is that fine, my dear friends? Is that fine? Yes or no? Any question here? Any question? Friends, quickly, I will also cover the concept of lease modification in the books of the lessor. While it is not relevant, not important from the examination perspective, but let me cover the lease modification from the perspective of lessor, right? Okay. So this part is clear to everyone, friends. This part is clear to everyone, right? Okay. Lessor accounting. So let me write it. Lessor accounting. Lease modification. Okay. In the books of lessor. You remember the lease modification in the books of lessee? Are you able to remember that? Lease modification in the books of lessee? Whenever there is a change in the scope, change in consideration, change in the lease term, what you need to do? First, on the commencement date, you need to compute your ROU and lease liability. Then, till the time of modification, on the date of modification, you need to compute the carrying value of ROU and lease liability. Correct? Then, you need to remeasure your lease liability. Correct? Then you need to adjust the change in the ROU asset. Correct? Correct? This is what we have discussed. हमने यही पढ़ा था ना? Right? If there is a decrease in the scope, if there's a decrease in the scope, and by decreasing the scope or decreasing the lease term, the liability is decreasing. The liability is getting decreased. What happens in that case? You have to debit your liability and you have to credit your right of use asset. But let's say your liability is decreasing by 1 lakh rupees, but you have the right of use asset available to the extent of 90,000 rupees only. Okay, you cannot credit what you are not having as a debit. आप किसी एसेट को उसकी कैरिंग वैल्यू से ज्यादा क्रेडिट तो नहीं कर सकते ना. In that case, what you will do? While you will do lease liability debit 1 lakh, ROU asset credit 90,000, where the 10,000 will go?
Profit and loss.
The 10,000 will go to profit and loss, right? So we understood the lease modification from the perspective of the lessee accounting. And we have also understood whenever there is an increase in the scope, the scope of underlying asset is increasing. And that increase in scope is commensurating with the increase in lease rental on the market value, on the fair value, right? In that case, standard says that this modification has to be treated as a separate contract, right? You are not required to adjust your existing right of use asset and lease liability. You need to consider this. You need to consider this as a separate component. Okay. My dear friends, so let me give you the essence of lessor account lease modification in the books of the lessor, right? Friends, if it is an operating lease, okay. If it is an operating lease, in that case, what happens generally? What happens in the operating lease? Tell me. If there is an operating lease in the books of the lessor, what is the accounting? Can you help me with the accounting?
Straight lining over the
Sorry?
straight lining over the lease term.
Straight lining over the lease term. Straight lining over the lease term. Okay. So basically it will be straight lining over the lease term. Okay. Yes. And वो asset का क्या करेगा lessor? What lessor will do with the asset? Asset का depreciation charge करेगा lessor. Right? अगर operating lease है तो lessor की books में तो asset है ना. Lessor has purchased the asset. Lessor has purchased the building and given on a lease at a operating lease. तो उस बिल्डिंग का क्या करेगा? Lessor will depreciate that building. Lessor will charge depreciation and lessor will recognize rental income on a straight line basis. Correct? So friends, if there is an operating lease and there is a modification of the operating lease, there is a modification in the operating lease. Standard says that treat the modification, in case of modification, treat the modification as what? Termination of the old lease and creation of new lease contract. Creation of new lease contract, right? So old lease has to be reversed and new lease needs to be created. Reversed means termination, right? If any balances are there, that balances needs to be settled and the new lease needs to be created. Okay. Correct. So like new accounting, for example, there was a lease agreement for 7 years. It was an operating lease agreement. And after 3 years, there is a modification. After 3 years, the agreement was modified to another 10 years. Correct. So instead of remaining 4 years, now it is remaining 10 years. Okay. So 3 years, whatever we have recognized 3 years, already we have recognized. But now we will recognize this entire lease contract as a lease contract for 10 years. Right. If the straight lining is required, if there is an escalation clause, we'll do all this accounting. Sir, what happened if there was an escalation clause and we have already created some lease equalization asset? In that case, what will happen? So whatever is there, it has to be reversed, right? Because it will be considered as a termination of the existing contract. तो termination में क्या होता है? आपके जो भी asset liability के balances हैं वो क्या होते हैं? Reverse हो जाते हैं. यही होता है ना? Correct? This will happen na?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So the second example, sir, operating lease was simple. But what happens if it is a finance lease? What happens if it is a finance lease? if there is a modification in the finance lease. Okay. For example, there is an increase in scope, right? The lessee told me that Mr. Lessor, instead of 10,000 square feet, now I need 15,000 square feet. Give me more space. Give me 5,000 square feet more space. I told him, okay. But I told him, you know, the current market rental is 100 rupees per square feet. So you need to pay me 5,000 multiplied by 100 per month. He agreed. So friends, if there is an increase in scope and this increase in scope is commensurating with the increase in lease rentals, which is at fair value, market value, that is at fair value, market value, it commensurating with the increase in lease rental, that is at fair value, right? In that case, this will be treated as a
Separate lease contract.
the modification will be treated as what? Will be treated as a separate contract. मतलब आप इसको separate contract treat करोगे, whether it is a finance lease, operating lease, equalization करना है या आपको finance lease receivable create करना, you will consider this as a separate contract. Second, for example, this modification, right? Earlier, the lease term was 10 years and it was considered as a finance lease. But now, after 2 years, the lease term was shortened. The lease term was decreased by 5 years. So now, due to substantial decrease in lease term, it becomes operating lease, right? So modification resulting in change in classification from finance lease to operating lease. Modification resulting in change in classification from finance lease to operating lease. What will happen now? Simple standard says that what? Carrying value of finance lease receivable, okay, will become carrying value of finance lease receivable will become the value of the asset. For example, so let me write an example here, okay, so that you will be able to understand. A Limited being a lessor, has purchased, A Limited being a lessor has purchased a car for rupees 10 lakh, right? Life is 10 years. Life is 10 years. Okay. He has leased out that car. To B Limited. He has leased out that car to B Limited. Just a minute. He has leased out that car to B Limited for 8 years, right? For 8 years. After 2 years, the lessor and lessee agrees to reduce the lease term by 4 years. Explain the impact of modification. Okay. So let's say, so friends, tell me what was the accounting entry? What was the initial recognition? What was the initial recognition in the books of the lessor? Initial recognition किस पे था? कार अकाउंट डेबिट टू बैंक अकाउंट, पीपी, कार अकाउंट डेबिट टू बैंक, यही होगी ना एंट्री? कार
Yes.
अकाउंट डेबिट टू बैंक ही होगा ना, टू बैंक क्रेडिट। कितनी वैल्यू थी? 10 लाख रुपए की वैल्यू थी, 10 लाख 10 लाख। जब इसको लीज पे दिया, सो 10 ईयर लाइफ 10 ईयर lease term 8 year. So what is the classification? Life 10 year, lease term 8 year. What is the classification of lease in the books
Finance.
of the lessor? Finance lease classification. Lease classification. Finance lease. What is the accounting entry in case of finance lease? Finance lease receivable account debit, receivable account debit to what? To
Car, derecognizing the asset.
to car account. Okay. Assuming I'm giving you a hypothetical number, assuming this finance lease receivable is 8 lakh. Okay. 8 lakh. To car account 10 lakh. Okay. So what is the differential? Where the differential will go? Loss on derecognition. 2 lakh, which is balancing figure. ठीक है? After 2 years, what happened? After 2 years, it was decided to reduce the lease term by 4 years. 4 years. Now, what happened in this case when it was decided to reduce the lease term by 4 years? Now, from 8 years, the total period comes out at 4 years. So 10. Now the life is 10 years. The lease term is, the total lease term is 4 years. The total lease term is 4 years. 4 years. Remaining lease term is 2 years. The remaining lease term is 2 years. Okay, remaining lease term is 2 years. ये समझ आया या नहीं आया ये क्वेश्चन? तो अब क्या करें? And what we will do for this finance lease? अब ये finance lease receivable का क्या करेंगे? This finance lease income, interest income has to be charged on finance lease receivable and payment has to be collected, right? So finance lease asset will go up by interest income and it will get down by the lease payment, right? By the payment received. Okay. So now the lease classification will become operating lease. Lease classification will become operating lease. Assuming the carrying value of finance lease receivable at the end of 2 years is equal to 6.5 lakhs, assuming. Now, what is the accounting? Simple accounting. Since it become an operating lease, you need to credit your finance lease receivable. आपको पता है ना, operating lease में तो कोई finance lease receivable नहीं होता ना? There is no finance lease receivable in operating lease. So operating lease में क्या होता है? Asset होती है. In the books of the lessor, there is an asset. So what is the asset? Car. At what value?
Carrying value.
6.5. There is no profit, no loss. You just need to capitalize your car at the value of the finance lease receivable. Okay. Okay. Is that clear? Anu, even though if the after 2 years, if the life should be 8 years, even though out of 8 years, the lease period which is remaining is only 2 years, na? When it was 10 years, the lease term was 8 years. And it was decided to reduce the lease term by 4 years. Means the total lease term is 4 years. Means after 2 years, the remaining life is 8 years and the remaining lease term is 2 years only. Okay. So it will become your operating lease, na? It will become your operating lease. So we have discussed in case of finance lease, if the increase in scope is there, which is in line with the increase in rental, it is a separate contract. If the increase, I mean to say, if the modification resulting in the change in classification, then the value of the asset is equal to the carrying value of the finance lease receivable. What happens in case of all other kind of modification? What happens in all other kind of modification? For example, decrease in scope. For example, increase in lease term, decrease in lease term, which is not leading to your change in classification. Other modifications, right? बाकी सारी मॉडिफिकेशन जो कि ना तो सेपरेट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है और ना ही लीज की क्लासिफिकेशन को चेंज कर रहा है, उसमें क्या काउंटिंग होगी अदर मॉडिफिकेशंस में? अप्लाई. Finance lease receivable is which kind of asset? Tell me. Finance lease receivable is which kind of asset? Whether it is a PP, whether it is a investment property, whether it is a lease asset, finance lease receivable. This asset is which kind of finance asset? This is a financial asset. This finance lease receivable is a financial asset. Financial asset. And this asset will come under IND AS 109. Okay. This is a financial asset. आप अभी फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट की क्लासेस आपकी होंगी, you will read this financial instrument in detail. So standard says that for all other modification where the classification is not changing, it is still continue to be finance lease receivable. Standard says that apply modification accounting as per IND AS 109. As per IND AS 109, right? Sir, what is IND AS 109 accounting? I'm not going to cover. So it will be covered when you will read IND AS 109. Friends, this is the lease modification in the books of the lessor. This is the accounting treatment. And my dear friends, not very much relevant from the examination perspective. Not very much relevant. Okay. Not very much relevant. Right. Friends, one concept I need to discuss more here. Right. And the concept is manufacturer or dealer lessor concept. Okay. The concept is manufacturer or dealer lessor. Manufacturer or dealer lessor. Okay. Manufacturer or dealer lessor. What is that concept, my dear friends? What is that concept for manufacturer and dealer lessor? उसका concept क्या है manufacturer और dealer lessor का? Friends, you remember we have done the accounting of lessor accounting in the books of finance lease. We have done the accounting now. So let me take that finance lease. Okay. This was the accounting which we have covered, right? This was the accounting which we have covered for finance lease. So let me again reiterate this accounting. Finance lease. A Limited has purchased a car for rupees 8 lakh on 1st April 15. Life of car is 5 years. After 1 year, A leases out the car to B for rupees 2 lakh per annum for 4 years. Unguaranteed residual value is 50,000. Interest rate implicit in the lease is 10%. And lessee has guaranteed a residual value of 30,000 to the lessor. Net unguaranteed residual value is 20,000. Calculate the necessary impact in the books of A Limited. Accounting in the books of the lessor. First accounting car to bank, then depreciation to accumulated depreciation. The carrying value of the car is 6,50,000. Correct. So classification is the finance lease in the books of the lessor. It is a finance lease. Lessor has to de-recognize the asset and lessor has to recognize finance lease receivable, which is present value of future lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value. What is the accounting entry? Finance lease receivable account debit to profit on de-recognition to car PPE account 6,50,000. Are we okay with this accounting entry? Friends, are we okay with this accounting entry or we are not okay with this accounting entry? Tell me. क्या हमारे को ये accounting entry ठीक लगती है? Are we okay with this accounting entry?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
अगर मैन्युफैक्चरर और डीलर लेसोर होगा, व्हाट इज मिंट बाय मैन्युफैक्चरर और डीलर लेसोर? व्हाट इज मिंट बाय दैट टर्म? क्या मतलब है इसका? इसका मतलब है आई एम मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एन एसेट एंड आई एम गिविंग दैट एसेट ऑन अ लीज बेसिस. आई एम मैन्युफैक्चरिंग द एसेट एंड आई एम गिविंग द एसेट ऑन अ लीज बेसिस, राइट? यही मतलब है ना? मैन्युफैक्चरर और डीलर लेसोर का मतलब तो यही है ना कि मैं एक एसेट बना रहा हूं. I am manufacturing the asset and I am giving the asset on a lease basis. This is what is the meaning of the manufacturer and dealer lessor. Correct? यही है मतलब? Okay. So
Yes.
if I am into the manufacturing of an asset, if I am into the manufacturing of an asset, right, and I'm leasing that asset, okay, and I'm leasing that asset. So don't you think I have to recognize some top line also, some revenue from operation? My business is to lease out that asset. My business is to lease out that machinery. So don't you think if I am leasing that asset on a finance lease, don't you think it is more of I am selling that asset? अगर
Cost.
फाइनेंस लीज पे मैं एसेट दे रहा हूं और मेरा बिजनेस ही एसेट को लीज पे देने का है, मैं सब्सटेंशियली अपने रिस्क एंड रिवार्ड ट्रांसफर कर रहा हूं, तो आपको नहीं लगता कि ये एसेट मैं बेच रहा हूं? आई एम सेलिंग दैट एसेट, राइट? So whatever accounting we have understood, we have learned and we have seen, the accounting was whenever it is a finance lease, lessor has to recognize finance lease receivable financial asset account debit to normal asset account. मतलब एक एसेट को डी रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे, एक एसेट को रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे, करेक्ट? And the differential will go to the gain or loss. But if your business is to sell, if your business is to manufacture cars and sell cars, right, ये सेल ही तो है. और क्या है? ये फाइनेंस लीज है, इसका मतलब सेल ही तो है. If you are into the business of manufacturing cars and selling cars, आपके प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस में क्या आइटम आनी चाहिए? क्या आना चाहिए?
Inventory.
सॉरी,
Inventory.
हाँ, इन्वेंट्री तो बैलेंस शीट में आनी चाहिए, बट P&L में और क्या आना चाहिए? P&L में
गुड सोल्ड दिखना चाहिए प्रॉपरली और रेवेन्यू भी दो concept
रेवेन्यू.
दिखने-
मेरे P&L में रेवेन्यू दिखना चाहिए, रेवेन्यू फ्रॉम ऑपरेशन दिखना चाहिए, मेरे P&L में रेवेन्यू दिखना चाहिए, और मेरे P&L में कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड्स सोल्ड भी दिखना चाहिए, राइट? कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड्स सोल्ड भी दिखना चाहिए, करेक्ट? सर, will I not recognizing this finance lease receivable? I'll recognize this finance lease receivable. This accounting entry will still be there, right? The fair value of the underlying asset as revenue or the present value of the lease payment discounted using a market rate of interest, whichever is lower, right? Friends, what is my revenue? So this accounting entry I will follow. I will follow this accounting entry, right? So friends, this accounting entry I'll make, right? In case of a manufacturer or dealer lessor, I will put this accounting entry, finance lease receivable, okay, to car PP account, but I will also require to credit my what? To revenue, which is sales, And अगर मैं revenue record करूंगा तो मैं और क्या record करूंगा? Cost of goods sold, It is your cost of goods sold, debit, right? I will recognize my revenue and I will also recognize my sales. I will recognize my revenue and I'll recognize my sales, right? Correct? Is that right? And what is my revenue? What lessor will recognize? The fair value of the underlying asset as revenue or the present value of the lease payment, whichever is lower. Because you are recognizing a revenue, you have to be more conservative, right? So what you are getting as a consideration, right? So what you are getting? What is your revenue? Your revenue is fair value of the asset transferred or present value of lease payment, whichever is lower. For example, fair value of the asset, underlying asset is 20 lakh, but the present value which you are getting for a lease payment is 18 lakh. Your revenue is 18 lakh, right? And your cost of goods sold, what is your cost of goods sold? Cost of goods sold is carrying amount minus present value of unguaranteed residual value. Present value of minus present value of unguaranteed residual value, right? Present value of unguaranteed residual value. Is that clear or not clear? Clear हुआ या नहीं हुआ ये?
Sorry, sir, not clear.
Not clear? Okay. So let me clear this again. Not to worry. Let me clear this again. Okay.
Why we have recognized profit on
So I'm coming to that. Okay. So let me explain this part with the help of an example. Shall I explain with the help of an example?
सर पहले आप फॉर्मूलाज लिख दीजिए जो आपने भी बोले थे कि
Okay.
प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ
अभी लिखता हूँ मेरे. Okay. So I hope my Excel file is visible to everyone ना? Excel file सबको दिख रही है ना?
Yes, sir.
नहीं दिख रही? दिख
यस
रही है?
सर दिख रही है
Yes, sir, visible.
So basically, what happens in this case? Okay. So what is my cost of goods sold? My cost of goods sold is my carrying amount, carrying value of asset minus present value of unguaranteed residual value, जो 20,000 रुपए की present value है इस केस में, right? और मेरा revenue क्या होगा? Revenue is lower of what? Lower of what? Fair value of underlying asset
Or present value.
or present value of lease payments. Present value of lease payments. Right. इस present value of lease payments में सर हम unguaranteed residual value लेंगे revenue recognize करते हुए. I am saying that I am going to collect 10,000 lease rental every year for 5 years. Okay. 10,000 rupees lease rental every year for 5 years. And I'm also expecting a residual value of 5,000 at the end of the life. So will I recognize revenue for that 5,000 also?
Yes.
Friends, standard is very conservative when it is talking about revenue recognition. No one has guaranteed you that 5,000 rupees. The 10,000 annual rentals, it is guaranteed, it is contractual, right? But this 5,000, you remember, identify the contract with the customer. There has to be customer. Is there anyone who is giving you 5,000 right now? Whether you have entered into a contract, अगर contract में enter करते तो फिर unguaranteed क्यों बोलते? Making sense or not making sense? So in case of manufacturer or dealer lessor, right? For the purpose of revenue and for the purpose of cost of goods sold, for the purpose of revenue, you are not required to take present value of unguaranteed residual value in consideration, right? What is your revenue? Your revenue is present value of future lease payment, excluding unguaranteed residual value, or fair value of underlying asset, whichever is lower, right? What is your cost of goods sold? Whatever is the carrying value is coming into your books minus unguaranteed residual value, you need to reduce. This is the formula given in the standard, right? So now, first, I will go to one of the complex example from ICAI study material. Then I will again write the accounting entries and I'll explain the calculation. Shall I do this? Right? करूं मैं उसको? Okay.
Yes.
Whether my study material is visible or it is not visible? Is that visible?
No, sir.
I think so. Let me open it again. I think it was closed. Illustration number 38. Illustration number 38. Share. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Visible? Lessor accounting for a finance lease in case of a manufacturer or dealer lessor. A dealer lessor enters into a 10-year lease of equipment with lessee. What is the lease term? 10 years. The equipment is not specialized in nature and is expected to have alternative use to the lessor at the end of 10-year lease term. Okay. Under the lease, lessor receives annual lease payment of 15,000 payable at the end of the year. What you are required to do? 15,000 is the annual rental. So you need to compute the present value of the lease payment at the rate of discount rate is given or not given. Discount rate is given. 10.078% discount rate is given. आप इसका निकाल लोगे प्रेजेंट वैल्यू 15,000 एनुअल पेमेंट्स सो 15,000 मल्टीप्लाई बाय 10 1,50,000 उसका पीवी निकाल लोगे 10 ईयर का एन्युटी फैक्टर से मल्टीप्लाई करके लेसोर एक्सपेक्ट्स द रेसिडुअल वैल्यू ऑफ इक्विपमेंट टू बी 50,000 द एंड ऑफ 10 ईयर लीज टर्म एक्सपेक्ट का मतलब क्या हुआ इट इज अनगारंटेड Lessee provides a residual value guarantee that protect lessor from the first 30,000 of loss for sale at a price below the estimated residual value at the end of the lease term, that is 50,000. What does this third paragraph means?
30,000 guaranteed residual value.
30,000 becomes the guaranteed residual value, contractual residual value. It is identified value. So now what is my unguaranteed residual value?
20,000.
20,000 क्योंकि लेसी ने पहले 30,000 के लॉस को प्रोटेक्ट कर दिया है ओके सो बेयर मिनिमम दिस लेसोर विल रिसीव 30,000 rupees. The equipment has an estimated remaining economic life of 15 years, a carrying amount of rupees 1 lakh and a fair value of rupees 1,11,000. So what is given in this question? What is given in this question? Fair value is given in this question. Fair value दी हुई है ना और क्या दिया हुआ है इस क्वेश्चन में
Carrying
इस
amount.
क्वेश्चन में और भी कुछ दिया हुआ है क्या दिया है इस क्वेश्चन में फेयर वैल्यू दी है और क्या दिया है इस क्वेश्चन में कैरिंग वैल्यू दी है कैरिंग वैल्यू भी दी है इस क्वेश्चन The lease does not transfer ownership of the underlying asset to the lessee at the end of the lease term or contain an option to purchase the underlying asset. The interest rate implicit in the lease is 10.078%. How should the lessor account for the same in its books of accounts, right? Friends, while the ownership is not there, the life is also 60%. The purchase option is not there. But whether it is a finance lease or operating lease, you need to check the present value of future lease rental, right? The carrying a value of the equipment is 1 lakh and the fair value is 1,11,000. If your present value of minimum lease payment covers the majority amount, substantial amount of fair value of the lease asset, it will be a case of finance lease. So this question says that lessor shall classify the finance lease because the sum of the present value of lease payment amounts to substantially all of the fair value of the underlying asset. So let me look at what is the present value of future lease payments. So what is my present value of future lease payment? My present value of future lease payment. Okay. Calculation of net investment in lease का मतलब present value of future lease payment, which includes what?
Unguaranteed.
इसके अंदर आपका पहले हम गारंटीड रेसिडुअल वैल्यू निकालेंगे, राइट? और फिर उसके बाद अनगारंटीड भी निकालेंगे, दोनों आ जाएगा ना, गारंटीड अनगारंटीड दोनों आएगा.
Yes, sir.
So what is the present value? 1,03,000 plus 7,660. It is coming out at what? 1 lakh.
Estimates the fair value.
1,11,000 and it is equivalent to fair value. तो फाइनेंस लीज का कॉन्सेप्ट बना या नहीं बना क्वेश्चन?
Yes, sir.
फाइनेंस लीज का क्वेश्चन बन गया. ओके, वेरी गुड. आपको क्वेश्चन क्लियर है सबको? Whether the question is clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Question सबको क्लियर है ना? Now we need to solve this question. First entry, finance lease receivable account debit. What is the value of finance lease receivable? Net investment in the lease. Present value of what? Future lease payment, which includes guaranteed residual value and unguaranteed residual value. मैंने बताया था ना, प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ फ्यूचर लीज पेमेंट प्लस अनगारंटेड रेसिडुअल वैल्यू बताया था ना आपको. ये वाली एंट्री मैंने बताई है ना अभी, ये वाली एंट्री फाइनेंस लीज रिसीवेबल अकाउंट डेबिट. ये इलस्ट्रेशन नंबर क्या है? 38 है ना. ये इलस्ट्रेशन नंबर 38 है ना.
Yes, sir.
Illustration 38 of ICAI study material. Okay. So what is given in the question? इस क्वेश्चन में प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ लीज पेमेंट, प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ लीज पेमेंट्स, राइट, इंक्लूडिंग सो प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ लीज पेमेंट, एनुअल पेमेंट प्लस जीआरवी, गारंटीड रेसिडुअल वैल्यू, जीआरवी. इसका टोटल क्या था? क्वेश्चन में क्या दिया था टोटल? 1,03,340, राइट, यही था ना.
Yes, sir.
103,340 था ना. 103,340.
Yes.
103,340. एंड व्हाट इज द प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ यूजीआरवी? यूजीआरवी की प्रेजेंट वैल्यू क्या थी?
7,660.
7,660. 7,660. So just a minute. Yes. So what is the total value? The total value is my 1,11,000, which is equivalent to the fair value of the lease asset. So what is my first entry? My first entry is finance lease receivable account debit. This is my net investment in the lease, right? ये नंबर मेरा क्या है? Net investment in the lease है. फाइनेंस लीज रिसीवेबल अकाउंट डेबिट 1,11,000. ये ठीक है ना? कोई प्रॉब्लम तो नहीं यहाँ पे? Is there
No,
any
sir.
problem in this question? No? Okay. So finance lease receivable account debit. What is the next entry I need to pass? अगर मैं फाइनेंस लीज रिसीवेबल को डेबिट करूंगा तो मैं अपने एसेट को भी तो डी रिकॉग्नाइज करूंगा. आई हैव रिकॉग्नाइज वन एसेट, आई हैव टू डी रिकॉग्नाइज द अनदर एसेट ना. किस वैल्यू पे करूंगा दूसरे एसेट को डी रिकॉग्नाइज?
Carrying amount.
कैरिंग अमाउंट पे करूंगा, राइट. एंड व्हाट इज द कैरिंग वैल्यू गिवन इन द क्वेश्चन? क्वेश्चन में दी है कैरिंग वैल्यू
1 lakh.
टू व्हाट वाज द एसेट? टू एसेट अकाउंट पीपी, टू एसेट पीपी अकाउंट क्रेडिट. दिस इज 1 lakh. This is 1 lakh. Carrying value of the asset. And this is net investment in the lease. Or should I write present value of future lease payment plus UGRV? लिखूं मैं UGRV? सबको पता है ना अब तो. Okay, so this will be debit, this will be credit. Now, what is the next entry? अगली एंट्री क्या होगी? अब क्या करूं मैं? मैंने ये दोनों काम तो कर लिए, अब मैं क्या करूं?
Revenue
I
and
do?
cost of goods sold.
To revenue.
Revenue.
I need to recognize my revenue, right? So of course I need to credit revenue to revenue. Revenue किस बेसिस पे करूं? अभी मैंने क्या बताया था आपको? Lower of what? Lower of what?
Fair value or present value excluding unguaranteed residual value.
और प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ लीज पेमेंट विच इज एक्सक्लूडिंग. वैसे तो जो लीज पेमेंट होती है ना उसमें अनगारंटेड रेसिडुअल वैल्यू नहीं आता, वो अलग से लिखना पड़ता है. एक्सक्लूडिंग यूजीआरवी. लेट मी राइट एज एक्सक्लूडिंग यूजीआरवी. सो व्हाट इज माय फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ अंडरलाइंग एसेट? व्हाट इज माय फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ अंडरलाइंग एसेट?
1,11,000.
1,11,000. व्हाट इज माय पीवी ऑफ लीज पेमेंट एक्सक्लूडिंग यूजीआरवी?
1,03,340.
103,340. So what is my revenue?
1,03,340.
1,03,340. अब मैं क्या करूंगा? अगर रेवेन्यू रिकॉर्ड करोगे, अगर ग्रॉस ग्रॉस सेल्स रिकॉर्ड करोगे तो कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड्स सोल्ड भी तो रिकॉर्ड करना पड़ेगा। कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड्स सोल्ड अकाउंट डेबिट। मैंने क्या बताया था कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड्स सोल्ड के लिए?
कैरिंग
कैरिंग
वैल्यू
वैल्यू माइनस व्हाट? माइनस
प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ अनगारंटीड
प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ यूजीआरवी। ये सारी एंट्री आप डे 1 पे डाल रहे हो, इसलिए आपको प्रेजेंट वैल्यू से कंपेयर करना पड़ेगा। प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ यूजीआरवी। सो व्हाट इज माय कैरिंग वैल्यू? 1 लाख है, नीचे ही तो दिया है 1 लाख। व्हाट इज माय प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ यूजीआरवी?
7660.
7660। सो दिस इज डेबिट एंड दिस इज क्रेडिट। फ्रेंड्स, बैलेंसिंग फिगर क्या होगी? व्हाट इज माय बैलेंसिंग फिगर? My cost of goods sold and finance lease receivable. I have a total asset of 203340 and I have a credit of 203340. So in this case, there is a no profit, no loss. Why? Because you can see the total net investment in the lease is equivalent to the fair value of the lease asset, right? And hence there is no profit, no loss, right? Otherwise, if there would be any balancing figure, what will be that balancing figure? That balancing figure will be the gain or loss. You can see that balancing figure will be gain or loss. You can see we can take this number, we can take this, and we can take this part also, right? So what is remaining? Only profit on derecognition, profit or loss on derecognition, right? So that will come as a what? That will come as a profit or loss. मैन्युफैक्चरर और डीलर लेसोर का समझ में आ गया। अब मैं आपको स्टडी मेट दिखाऊं। Study mate, I hope study mate is visible.
Yes, sir.
This is kind of a very fatty question. And would you like to see the answer also? See the answer. Can you see the answer? Right? Simple है नहीं है, सिर्फ हमने जो लेसोर अकाउंटिंग में किया, we have done one additional task. And what is that additional task? That additional task is we have credited revenue and we have debited cost of goods sold. That was the additional task which we have done. Correct? Revenue was recognized at lower of, because you have to be very conservative when you are recognizing revenue, lower of fair value of underlying asset and what? Present value of lease payment. Right? Present value is payment excluding your unguaranteed residual value. Right? And what is your cost of goods sold? It's a carrying value which is coming into the books minus what? Minus present value of UCR.
Value.
So friends, with this, we have concluded, we have covered this entire Ind AS 116 lease accounting in the last 5 classes. And friends, we have covered so many concepts, so many aspects in Ind AS 116. In the next 3-4 minutes, just let me reiterate or let me make you guys remember that what we have covered already. Friends, we started our journey with Ind AS 116 concept, that this is the standard which is different from the lessee accounting perspective, right? This standard is different from accounting standard 19, okay? From the lessee perspective, from the lessor perspective, largely same, but from the lessee perspective, quite different. Friends, in this standard, the lease contract is defined as a contract where a party is transferring or conveys a right to control, transfers the right to control the use of an identified asset for a specified term in exchange for a consideration. Then we discussed what is meant by identified asset. Then we discussed identified asset is something which is explicit or implicit written in the contract and where the lessor does not have a substantive substitution right. Then we understood what is the meaning of right to control the use of an asset. Then we discussed that the benefit substantially from the use of the asset should lie to the lessee, and it is the lessee who can take a decision how and for what purpose the asset is going to be used. Then we discussed lease term. Lease term we have discussed. Lease term is equal to non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period if lessee is reasonably certain to opt, plus optional termination period if lessee is reasonably certain not to opt the termination period. Then we discussed lease payment. There are lease payment, which is fixed payment plus in substance fixed payment plus variable payment on the basis of index or rate plus exercise price plus termination penalty plus guarantee. So your guarantee, residual value guarantee given by the lessee to the lessor. These are the 5 payment which needs to be considered as a lease payment. From the lessor perspective, one more payment will be added, which is your any residual value guarantee given by the party related to the lessee or any unrelated parties, right? So this is what we have understood. Then we have discussed the concept of inception date, the commencement date concept, the implicit rate of return, discount rate, which is implicit rate in the lease. And we have discussed that the lessor has to capitalize on the basis of, so the discount rate is equal to implicit rate, implicit interest in the lease, which is largely the lessor IRR, right? So if lessor internal rate of return is not available, if interest implicit in the lease is not available, you have to use incremental borrowing rate to the lessee, right? IBR to the lessee, okay? This is what we have discussed. Then we have discussed at the time of initial recognition, we have to capitalize right of use asset, and right of use asset is equal to present value of lease payment plus any payment made on or before the commencement date plus initial direct cost plus provision for asset retirement obligation. This right of use asset is going to be depreciated over the lease term. If there is a purchase option which is available and it is reasonably certain that the lessee will purchase the asset, in that case, the asset has to be depreciated over the useful life of the asset, not the lease term. This asset is also subject to impairment, right? Friends, then we discuss the lease liability has to be, unwinded. I mean to say lease liability has to be gone up by the interest expenses and it will be reduced by the lease payments, okay? Then we have discussed, after this initial and subsequent accounting, we discuss the lease modification. If there is a change in scope, change in consideration, change in lease term, which were not formed part of the original terms and condition, it has to be treated as a lease modification, and this lease modification accounting has to happen, right? And we have discussed in detail. Then we have discussed, friends, the lessor accounting, and in lessor accounting, we have discussed there could be a case of operating lease and could be a case of finance lease. In case of operating lease, the asset will continue to belong to the lessor and lessor will depreciate that asset and lessor will recognize the lease rental income on a straight line basis, right? As far as finance lease is concerned, lessor will de-recognize the asset and lessor will recognize the finance lease receivable, right? And what is the finance lease receivable? The finance lease receivable is nothing. Finance lease receivable is equal to present value of future lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value. It is also called as a net investment in the lease, okay? So whatever difference will be there, it will go to the P&L, right? This was about your finance lease accounting. There are 5 indicators which is given for the finance lease. How can you identify that it is a finance lease transaction? If any of the 5 conditions will met, it is a finance lease. For example, there is a purchase option which is available to the lessee and lessee will get this purchase option at a very nominal price. Number 2, it is certain that the ownership will be transferred at the end of the lease term. Number 3, the lease term covers major part of the economic life. Number 4, the present value of lease payment substantially equals to the fair value of the lease asset. It means the lessor is collecting largely the money which he would have been collected if he would have sold the asset, right? And the last part is if the asset is of a specialized nature, right? So this was the finance lease accounting. Then we discussed sublease concept where there is a head lease, there is a sublease, right? In head lease, there is a head lessor and head lessee. This head lessee will become the intermediate lessor in case of a sublease transaction, right? So of course, in head lease, lessor will do his own transaction like operating lease, finance lease classification. Lessee will do his own transaction like, right of use asset into lease liability transaction. Then if it is a sublease for this entire period, it is a finance lease. Lessor, intermediate lessor has to de-recognize the right of use asset and has to recognize the finance lease receivable, right? Then we have also discussed the sale and leaseback transaction today. We have discussed the separation of lease and non-lease component where there is an exemption also available. And we have also discussed the lease modification in the books of lessor. And we have also covered Friends, in the last to last classes we have covered there is an exemption to ROU accounting in two cases, one which is a short-term lease and one which is a low-value lease exemption, right? So friends, with this in 3-4 minutes, I have summarized this entire Ind AS 116, what we have learned so far. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, students. And I hope you have enjoyed the session thoroughly, right? So this is my last session on Ind AS 116. So I want your feedback. So you can unmute and you can give your feedback that how did you like Ind AS 116 classes? Instead of writing, I want you guys to give me feedback by unmuting yourself.
So earlier when I read this 116, it was much more complex for me to understand different concepts, and there are different practical aspect how we value and how we recognize entries. But now after watching your sessions, it's absolutely clear in mind now, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pooja, for the feedback. So anyone else, Ginny, if you want to give the feedback, or Hemant, or Anila or Nisha?
Yes, sir.
Not a-
It was excellent, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sir,
Not just one
actually,
concept that you have taught, you've broken it down in such simple terms for us students that been very easy and it's been very interesting, sir. I don't think so anyone of us would have felt sleepy during any of your sessions, sir. Even if it was early in the morning, for us it's a difficult time, but still it was very interesting and no one felt sleepy throughout it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So we are just enjoying your session. We are understanding the whole concept, but with logic. So learning has become so logical.
Thank you. So Vignesh,
सर एक्चुअली पहले यानी इंड AS 116 से थोड़ा डर सा लगता था क्योंकि नहीं समझ में आता था, काफी कॉन्सेप्ट इस तरीके के थे कि नहीं समझ में आते थे, लेकिन अभी आपने जितना भी पढ़ाया है उस हिसाब से आप कोई भी क्वेश्चन अगर दोगे तो हम सॉल्व कर लेंगे.
oh, that's nice. Great.
थैंक यू सर.
Okay. So thank you, student. Thank you so much. And bye-bye. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Yeah, session is over.
Hello.
Thank you.